I found out my parents transferred the family metal shop to my brother, so I quit working 80 hours a week for free. A week later, my dad called me in a panic, screaming that our biggest client was leaving and the production line had stalled. I answered the phone with a glass of wine in my hand and said calmly, "Let the air handle it." Before I tell you how I brought my family's empire to its knees, using nothing but their own incompetence against them, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the person doing all the work while someone else took all the credit. My name is Zora Banks, and I am 35 years old. For the last 15 years, I have been the ghost in the machine of Banks Custom Metalworks. My father Otis started this shop in a garage on the south side of Chicago 40 years ago, but I was the one who turned it into a multi-million-dollar operation. I am a certified master welder and the operations manager. My hands are permanently stained with grease and scarred from TIG welding sparks. I have sacrificed my 20s, my social life, and my sleep to build this legacy. I thought I was building it for us. I was wrong. It all unraveled on a Sunday morning in November. The wind was whipping off Lake Michigan, biting and cold, but I was sweating. I had come into the office at 7 in the morning, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. We had a deadline for the Sterling Hotel project, a massive architectural staircase that needed to be perfect. I needed the blueprints I had left on my desk. The shop should have been empty. Sunday was the only day the roar of the CNC machines and the hiss of welding torches went silent. But as I walked down the hallway toward the executive suite, I heard voices. I froze. The frosted glass door to the conference room was closed, but the lights were blazing. I recognized the voices immediately. It was my father Otis, my mother Viola, my younger brother Andre, and a fourth voice that made my stomach turn. It was Mr. Henderson, our family lawyer. I should have knocked. I should have announced my presence. But something in the hushed tone of their conversation made me stop. I crept closer to the door, my work boots silent on the industrial carpet. "Just sign here, Andre," Mr. Henderson was saying, his voice sounding tired. "This transfers full executive control and 51% of the equity to you effective immediately. Your parents retain a minority stake, but for all legal intents and purposes, you are the owner of Banks Custom Metalworks." My hand hovered over the door handle. My breath hitched in my throat. Andre. My 28-year-old brother who had spent 6 years getting a 4-year business degree online. Andre who could not tell the difference between stainless steel and aluminum if his life depended on it. Then I heard Brittany, my sister-in-law. Her voice was high-pitched and dripping with that sugary sweetness that barely concealed her venom. "Oh, honey, look at that. CEO Andre Banks. It sounds perfect. Finally, we can get rid of that dusty old truck of yours and lease something that befits an executive. Maybe a Range Rover." I did not wait to hear any more. I pushed the door open. The heavy glass door swung inward and slammed against the stopper with a loud thud. The room went silent instantly. The scene before me was like a tableau of betrayal. My parents were sitting on one side of the mahogany table dressed in their Sunday church clothes. Andre was sitting at the head of the table, a pen in his hand, looking like a child caught stealing cookies. Brittany was standing behind him, her hands resting possessively on his shoulders. And Mr. Henderson was shuffling papers, looking everywhere except at me. "Zora," my mother gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "What are you doing here?" "We thought you were at the site." I ignored her. I walked straight to the table. I did not look at my family. I looked at the document in front of Andre. The ink was still wet. Deed of transfer and assignment of operational authority. "So this is why you asked me for the updated asset list last week," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I was fighting to control. "You were not auditing the insurance. You were valuing the company so you could give it away." My father Otis cleared his throat. He stood up, adjusting his tie. He was a big man, a man used to being obeyed, but he could not meet my eyes. "Now, Zora, calm down. This is not what it looks like. We were going to tell you. We just wanted to get the paperwork sorted first so there would be no confusion. Confusion about what, Dad?" I asked. Confusion about why the person who runs this company, who brings in 90% of the contracts and who actually knows how to weld, is being bypassed for someone whose biggest accomplishment is marrying a woman who thinks overhead is a type of ceiling fan. "Excuse me," Brittany snapped, stepping out from behind Andre. She smoothed down her designer dress, looking at my grease-stained Carhartt jacket with open disgust. "Watch your mouth, Zora. You are speaking to the owner of this company now. Andre has an MBA. He has vision. You are a laborer, Zora. You are good with your hands, sure, but you do not have the executive presence to lead." I laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. Executive presence. Brittany, last week I had to show Andre how to open a PDF file. The week before that, he ordered $20,000 worth of the wrong grade of steel because he thought it looked shinier on the website. "That is enough, Zora." My mother, Viola, stood up, slamming her hand on the table. Her face was hard. I had seen that look before. It was the look she gave me when I wanted to go to engineering school instead of finding a husband. It was the look that said I was failing my duty as a woman. "This is a family decision," my mother said. "Your father and I are tired. We want to retire. We need to know the business is in safe hands. Andre is your brother. He is a man. He has a wife. He has a child on the way. He has a legacy to build. And what am I?" I asked, feeling tears prick the corners of my eyes. "What am I?" "Mom chopped liver. I have been here for 15 years. I started sweeping floors when I was 20. I got my CWI certification while working full-time. I brought in the Sterling contract. I brought in the Naval Defense contract. I paid off the mortgage on this building 2 years early with the bonuses I earned." My father sighed as if explaining something simple to a stubborn child. "Zora, you are 35. You are single. You do not have a family to provide for. You have hobbies. You have your little apartment and your cat. You do not need the equity like Andre does. He is the future of the bank's name." The room spun. It was not just about the money. It was about the erasure. In their eyes, my 15 years of sweat burns and sleepless nights meant nothing, because I was a woman without a husband. To them, I was just a placeholder. A seat warmer until the prince was ready to take the throne. Andre finally spoke. He leaned back in the big leather chair, the chair my father had sat in for 40 years. He spun the pen between his fingers, trying to look casual, but I saw the sweat on his upper lip. "Look, Zora. Don't be dramatic. Nothing is going to change, really. You will still do what you do. You will run the floor. You will manage the guys. I will just be handling the big picture stuff, the finances, the strategy. It takes the pressure off you. You should be thanking us." "Thanking you," I repeated quietly. "Yes." Brittany chimed in, a smug smile spreading across her face. "And honestly, Zora, it is better this way. Imagine if clients saw you running things. No offense, but you always look like you just rolled out from under a truck. It is not exactly the image of a modern multi-million-dollar enterprise. Andre brings polish." I looked at Mr. Henderson. The lawyer was packing his briefcase, clicking the latches shut with finality. He knew this was wrong. He knew who really ran this place. But he worked for my parents, not me. He gave me a quick, apologetic nod and hurried out of the room, leaving me alone with the wolves. I took a deep breath. The smell of the shop floor oil, metal, and dust wafted in from the hallway. It was the smell of my life, and they were stealing it. But as I looked at them, my anger began to cool into something else. Something harder. Something colder. They thought they were taking a thriving business. They thought they were handing Andre a golden goose. They did not realize that I was the one feeding the goose. I was the one keeping the wolves at bay. I was the one who knew where the bodies were buried, and more importantly, I was the one who held the keys to the kingdom literally and figuratively. They wanted Andre to be the boss. Fine. They wanted me to be just a worker. Fine. I looked at my father. He seemed relieved, thinking the storm had passed. He thought I was accepting my fate just like I always had. Just like when I accepted the smaller bedroom so Andre could have the master. Just like when I accepted the state college so the funds could be saved for Andre's private tuition. So I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. Since Andre is now the owner and the CEO and has full operational authority, I assume the organizational chart is being restructured. Brittany laughed, a high tinkling sound. Oh, I am glad you brought that up. Yes, we have been looking at the numbers. Since you won't have the burden of executive decisions anymore, we can't justify your current salary package. We need to free up cash flow for the new branding strategy and office renovations. My mother nodded in agreement, avoiding my eyes. It is only fair, Zora. Andre has a baby coming. He needs the CEO's salary. We figured you would understand. I stared at them. They had not just stolen the company. They were planning to demote me to pay for their lifestyle. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was the calm of a person who realizes they have nothing left to lose. I realized in that moment that I did not need to fight them. I did not need to scream or beg or hire a lawyer to contest the deed. All I had to do was give them exactly what they wanted. I looked at Andre, who was already mentally spending the profits he had not earned. I looked at Brittany, who was practically drooling over the office decor. I looked at my parents, who had sacrificed their daughter on the altar of their son's ego. I unzipped my Carhartt jacket. Underneath, I was wearing my favorite vintage t-shirt. I felt lighter somehow. Okay, I said. I understand perfectly. The transition is effective immediately, right? Yes, Andre said, puffing out his chest. As of this signature, I am the boss. Good, I said. I turned to leave. Wait! Brittany called out, sharp and commanding. Where are you going? We are not done. We need to discuss your new role, and I want the keys to your office. I have a decorator coming at noon. I stopped at the door. I did not turn around. I gripped the door frame, my knuckles turning white, not from anger, but from the sheer effort of holding back the laughter that was bubbling up inside me. I am going to get a coffee. I lied. My mind was already racing. My office contained my personal computer. My wall contained my certifications. The server contained my proprietary CAD files. My new role, I thought. Oh, you have no idea what my new role is going to be. I walked out of the conference room and down the long hallway toward the shop floor. The silence of the machines felt different now. It did not feel like peace. It felt like a held breath. It felt like the calm before a storm. I walked into my office, the glass-walled fishbowl that overlooked the production floor. I looked at the desk where I had eaten thousands of lunches. I looked at the whiteboard covered in complex equations and production schedules that only I understood. Brittany wanted the keys. She wanted the title. She wanted the glory. She was about to find out that without me, this place wasn't a gold mine. It was a landmine, and she had just stepped right on the trigger. I grabbed a cardboard box from the supply closet. I didn't start packing personal items. I didn't pack the photo of me and Dad from 10 years ago. I reached up to the wall and took down the framed document that hung right behind my chair. American Welding Society, Certified Welding Inspector, Zora Banks. Then I took down the OSHA Safety Officer Certification. Then the ISO 9001 Lead Auditor Certificate. I placed them gently in the box. These weren't company property, these were mine. They belonged to Zora Banks, not Banks Custom Metalworks. I sat down at my computer. I logged in with my administrator password one last time. I opened the folder labeled Sterling Hotel Project, Master Files. I hovered the mouse over the delete button. But no, that would be too easy. That would be vandalism. I was not a vandal. I was a professional. Instead, I opened the external hard drive I kept in my safe. I dragged every single proprietary design, every custom welding procedure specification, and every client contact list onto my drive. Then I replaced the files on the server with the generic, uneditable PDF versions. the ones that looked pretty but contained zero technical data. I stood up, box in hand. I looked around the office one last time. "So where do I fit in?" I whispered to the empty room, echoing the question I had asked my parents. "I fit in everywhere. And without me, you fit nowhere." I walked out the back door into the biting Chicago wind. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I didn't slam the door. I just let it click shut softly behind me. The war had started. And they didn't even know they were under attack. Monday morning arrived with the heavy gray permanence of a prison sentence. I parked my 10-year-old truck in the furthest spot from the entrance, a habit I had developed to leave the prime spots for clients, though today it felt more like an act of exile. The air inside Banks Custom Metalworks usually smelled of ozone grinding dust and strong coffee, a scent that meant productivity and profit. Today, however, the shop floor smelled of fear. The rumors had obviously spread. The production line, usually a symphony of sparks and whirring CNC machines by 7:30, was silent. My crew, 20 burly men and 3 women who could outweld anyone in the state, stood in uneasy clusters near the break room. They were wearing their blue coveralls, their safety glasses resting on their foreheads, their faces etched with confusion. When I walked in, the conversation died instantly. Mike, my foreman, and a man who had taught me how to hold a stinger when I was 20, stepped forward. His eyes darted toward the executive offices overlooking the floor. "Zora," he whispered, his voice rough with gravel and concern. "Is it true? Did they really sign it over to the kid?" I looked at Mike. I looked at the team I had built, trained, and protected for a decade. I wanted to tell them to walk out. I wanted to tell them to burn the place down. But I swallowed the bile rising in my throat and nodded once. "It is true, Mike. But let's hear what they have to say." As if on cue, the door to the executive suite swung open. My brother Andre stepped out onto the metal grating of the mezzanine platform that overlooked the shop floor. If the situation weren't so dire, I would have laughed. In a shop where steel filings ruined shoes in a week and grease stained everything. Andre was wearing a 3-piece Italian suit that cost more than a week of payroll. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine reflecting the overhead halogen lights. He looked like a banker who had gotten lost on his way to a country club, not the owner of a heavy industrial fabrication plant. Behind him stood my parents Otis and Viola, looking down at the workers like benevolent monarchs greeting their subjects. And beside Andre, clinging to his arm like a decorative accessory, was Brittany. She was wearing a white dress, a choice so impractical for a metal shop that it bordered on insanity. "Everyone gather round," Andre's voice boomed over the PA system, cracking slightly on the high notes. "We have some exciting announcements regarding the future of Banks Custom Metalworks." The crew shuffled forward, their steel-toed boots clanking on the concrete. I stood at the back, leaning against a support column, my arms crossed over my chest. I felt like a ghost attending my own funeral. Andre gripped the railing, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "As you all know, my parents founded this company with blood, sweat, and tears. But the market is changing. To survive, we need to modernize. We need fresh leadership. That is why, effective immediately, I am assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer." There was a smattering of polite applause, mostly initiated by my mother. The workers remained silent, their eyes shifting nervously to me. "With this new leadership comes a new structure." Andre continued, his gaze finally finding me in the back of the room. He cleared his throat, adjusting his silk tie. "We need to streamline our operations. We need to cut the fat and focus on efficiency. Therefore, we are eliminating the position of operations manager." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mike took a step forward, his fists clenching, but I caught his eye and shook my head slightly. "Don't," I mouthed. "Not yet." "Zora Banks," Andre said, saying my name as if it were a bad taste in his mouth, "will be transitioning to a new role that better suits the company's current needs. She will be taking over as the warehouse inventory lead." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a demotion so staggering it felt physical. He was taking me from running the entire floor, managing multi-million-dollar contracts, and overseeing quality control to counting nuts and bolts in the back room. And Andre added, his voice gaining strength as he delivered the final blow. Commensurate with this change in responsibility, her compensation package will be adjusted to reflect market rates for a warehouse supervisor. Her new salary will be $45,000 per year. 45,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had been making $95,000 a salary that was already below market rate for a master welder and operations manager, but one I had accepted because this was a family business. I had sacrificed raises to keep the company afloat during lean years. I had worked 80-hour weeks for no overtime. And now they were cutting my pay by more than half. They were offering me a wage that barely covered my rent and student loans for a job an intern could do. Any questions, Andre asked, daring anyone to challenge him. Silence. Great. Let's get to work. The new era begins now. He turned and marched back into the office, his entourage following him. The meeting was over. The humiliation was complete. Mike walked over to me, his face red with suppressed rage. Zora, you can't be serious. Inventory lead. That is an insult. You are the only one certified to inspect the structural welds. You are the only one who knows the code for the Sterling project. If you go to the warehouse, who runs the floor? I looked at Mike, and for the first time that morning, a genuine smile touched my lips. It was a cold smile, sharp as a razor. That sounds like a management problem, Mike, and as I have just been informed, I am no longer management. I pushed off the pillar. Excuse me, Mike, I have to go report to my new station, but first I need to clean out my office. I walked up the metal stairs to the mezzanine. My office was the glass-walled room right next to the main executive suite. I had designed it myself, ensuring I had a clear line of sight to every welding bay on the floor. It was my command center. It was where I had spent nights sleeping on a cot during rush orders. It was where I had drafted the blueprints that saved the company from bankruptcy in 2008. When I reached the door, I found it already open. Brittany was inside. She was standing in the middle of the room, holding a swatch of fabric against the wall. She spun around when I entered, a look of faux surprise on her face. "Oh, Zora," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I didn't think you would be coming up here. I thought you would be heading straight to the warehouse, you know, to count things." I stepped inside. The room, usually organized with military precision, was in chaos. My files were swept off the desk into a pile on the floor. My ergonomic chair, which I had paid for myself, was pushed into a corner. "Get out of my office, Brittany," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Your office." She laughed, a high-pitched sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, honey, didn't Andre tell you? This isn't an office anymore. This is going to be the HR director's suite, and also a wellness room. I need a place to nap and meditate. Being an executive wife and director of human resources is exhausting work." "Director of HR," I repeated, staring at her. "You have a degree in art history, Brittany. You have never hired anyone in your life. You think FMLA is a radio station?" She narrowed her eyes, stepping closer to me. The sickly sweet facade dropped, revealing the arrogance underneath. "Watch your tone, warehouse girl. I am your boss now. And frankly, this room needs a complete overhaul. It smells like grease and sweat and desperation. It is so masculine, so aggressive. We need to soften the energy in here." "Feng shui, Zora. You wouldn't understand." She walked over to my desk and picked up a cardboard box that had been sitting there. It was a flimsy, used packing box. She shoved it toward me hard enough that the corner dug into my ribs. "Here," she said. "Pack your trash. I have a decorator coming at 11. I want this personal clutter gone. The pictures, the little trinkets, those ugly certificates on the wall. Take it all. I want this space empty and neutral." I looked down at the box, then up at her. She was smirking, waiting for me to explode. She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to cry. She wanted me to give her a reason to fire me for cause so they wouldn't have to pay unemployment. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Not today. I looked at the wall behind my desk. There, framed in simple black wood, were the documents that gave this company its legitimacy: my certified welding inspector license, my OSHA 30-hour safety certification, the ISO 9001 lead auditor credential, the state license for structural steel fabrication. Every single one of them had my name on it. Zora Banks. Not Otis Banks. Not Andre Banks. Me. Without those pieces of paper, this shop was just a building full of expensive metal. Without those certificates, we couldn't legally bid on government contracts. We couldn't sign off on structural beams. We couldn't even inspect our own work. Brittany thought they were just ugly decorations. She thought they were clutter. I took the box from her hands. The cardboard felt rough against my palms. "You are right, Brittany," I said, my voice eerily calm. "This room does smell like hard work. I can see why that would offend you." I walked over to the wall. I reached up and took down the first frame. My CWI license. I wiped a speck of dust from the glass. "You want the room empty?" I asked, turning to face her. "Yes," she snapped, checking her manicure. "Empty, clean, gone. By 11. I nodded slowly. "Understood. I will remove everything that belongs to me." I placed the frame gently in the box. Then I reached for the next one. And the next. Brittany watched me, bored, scrolling through Instagram on her phone. She had no idea what she was watching. She thought she was watching a defeated woman packing up her sad little life. She didn't realize she was watching the foundation of the company being dismantled brick by brick. I moved to the computer. I didn't log out. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a high-capacity flash drive. I plugged it in. "What are you doing?" Brittany asked, glancing up. "Just getting my personal contacts," I said. "You know, family photos, recipes." She rolled her eyes. "God, hurry up. And don't take any company property. I will be checking that box before you leave." I didn't answer. I just watched the progress bar on the screen. It wasn't photos. It was the proprietary welding procedure specifications I had written over 10 years. It was the TIAD files for the Stirling staircase. It was the custom algorithms for the robotic arm. I dragged them all to the drive. Then I selected the originals on the server. Delete, empty recycle bin. The progress bar vanished. I pulled the drive out and dropped it into my pocket. I packed the rest of the certificates. I packed my specialized inspection gauges, which I had bought with my own money because my father said they were too expensive. I packed my Rolodex of suppliers who gave us discounts solely because they liked me. When I was done, the office looked sterile. Dead. I picked up the box. It was heavy, weighted down with the legal soul of Banks Custom Metalworks. I walked to the door, stopping right in front of Brittany. "All done," I said. "It is all yours. The room is empty." She smirked, looking around the bare walls. "Much better. Now get down to the warehouse. Andre says there is a shipment of bolts that needs sorting." I walked out carrying my box. I didn't go to the warehouse. I walked straight to the time clock. I punched out. It was 10:30 in the morning. I walked out the side door into the biting wind. I threw the box into the passenger seat of my truck. I climbed in, started the engine, and looked back at the building one last time. They wanted me to be a warehouse worker. They wanted to pay me $45,000. I put the truck in gear. "Let's see how much a warehouse worker charges to save a $2 million contract," I whispered to myself. I drove away, leaving the gate open behind me. The countdown had begun. The cardboard box sat on my desk like an open mouth waiting to be fed. Brittany had called my career clutter, but as I looked at the items on the walls, I saw the structural integrity of the entire business. I reached for the frame closest to the door. It was my certified welding inspector license from the American Welding Society. I remembered the day I earned it. I had studied for 6 months straight, memorizing codes and metallurgy formulas, until my eyes burned, all while working full-time on the shop floor because my father refused to give me time off to study. This piece of paper was not just a certificate. It was the legal requirement for every structural steel job we bid on. Without a CWI on staff to sign off on the welds, the company could not legally fabricate beams columns or anything that held human weight. I wiped the dust off the glass. My name, Zora Banks, was printed in bold calligraphy. Not Banks Custom Metalworks, just me. It was a personal certification. It traveled with the individual, not the company. I placed it gently into the box. Next to it hung my OSHA 30-hour safety credential for general industry. This was the shield that kept the state inspectors from shutting us down. It designated me as the competent person on site, the one liable for safety protocols. If I was leaving, the liability was leaving with me. I took it down. The rectangle of paint behind it was a shade darker than the rest of the wall, a ghost of the authority I used to hold. Then came the ISO 9001 lead auditor certificate. This was the golden ticket that allowed us to bid on government defense contracts. It proved we had a quality management system that met international standards. I had built that system from scratch, writing the 300-page manual on my weekends. I took that down too. As I was wrapping the glass frame in bubble wrap, the door swung open without a knock. Andre strolled in. He had loosened his tie and was holding a tumbler of whiskey despite it being barely 11 in the morning. He looked at the bare spots on the wall and let out a scoff that was half laugh, half sneeze. "Cleaning up the wall of shame, I see," he said, leaning against the doorframe and taking a sip of his drink. "Good. Brittany was right. It looked like a locker room in here." I didn't turn around. I just kept packing. "These are professional certifications, Andre," I said calmly. "They are required for the shop to operate." Andre waved his hand dismissively, spilling a drop of amber liquid on the carpet. "Details, Zora. Details. That is small thinking. That is why you are going to the warehouse and I am in the big chair. In the modern business world, nobody cares about these dusty old pieces of paper. They care about the brand. They care about the story. They care about the MBA." He tapped the side of his head with his index finger. "It is all about strategy. We can hire some guy for $20 an hour to sign those forms if we really need to. You overvalue your contribution because you have a laborer's mindset." I stopped moving for a second. The insult hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. A laborer's mindset. He was talking about the technical expertise that paid for the suit he was wearing. He was talking about the skills that paid for the whiskey in his glass. "You are right, Andre," I said, forcing my voice to remain neutral. "I suppose I do have a laborer's mindset. I will just take my dusty papers home so they don't clutter up your vision." "Exactly," he said, pushing off the door frame. "Get this junk out of here, and Zora, make sure you wipe the computer. Brittany doesn't want to see your personal junk on the desktop. No cat pictures, no knitting patterns." He turned to leave but stopped and looked back over his shoulder. "And hey, don't look so sour. The warehouse isn't that bad. At least you will be out of sight when the important clients come through. We wouldn't want to confuse them about who is in charge." He walked out laughing to himself. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway. I sat down in my chair. The anger that had been simmering in my gut turned into ice. He wanted me to wipe the computer. He wanted me to remove my personal effects. I looked at the computer screen. It was glowing with the intricate lines of the Sterling Hotel Grand Staircase project. It was a masterpiece of engineering. A double helix design made of brushed stainless steel and tempered glass. I had spent 3 months designing it. Every curve, every connection point, every load-bearing calculation was my own creation. I had done the design work at home on my personal laptop using my own software license because Andre had refused to pay for the professional CAD subscription, claiming it was too expensive. Technically, these designs were my intellectual property. I had never signed an employment contract assigning my inventions to the company because my father didn't believe in contracts between family. Andre wanted me to wipe the computer. He wanted the cat pictures gone. I minimized the email window and opened the main server drive. I navigated to the folder labeled Active Projects. Inside were the source files for everything currently in production. the DWG files, the DXF files. These were the living, breathing DNA of our products. These files told the CNC laser cutters exactly where to cut. They told the robotic arm exactly how to move. If you wanted to change a dimension by even a millimeter, you needed these files. Next to them were the PDF files. The PDFs were just pictures. They were flat, dumb images. You could look at them, you could print them, but you couldn't feed them into a machine. You couldn't edit them without redrawing the entire project from scratch. I created a new folder on my external hard drive. I named it Zora Personal IP. I selected the Sterling Staircase source files. Drag and drop. I selected the Naval Base Security Gate source files. Drag and drop. I selected the custom tooling algorithms I had written for the press brake. Drag and drop. I watched the progress bar move. It was the only thing moving in the room. Outside the glass, the shop floor was humming along, unaware that its brain was being lobotomized. When the transfer was complete, I looked at the server folder. It was still full of files. I highlighted all the source files, the ones that actually made the machines work. I hit the delete key. "Are you sure you want to delete these 45 items?" the computer asked. I thought about Andre's whiskey. I thought about Brittany's decorator. I thought about my father telling me I was just a seat warmer. "Yes," I whispered. "I am sure." I clicked yes. Then I went to the recycle bin and emptied it. Now only the PDFs remained. To the untrained eye, the folder looked exactly the same. The drawings were there, the project names were there, but it was a facade. It was like a car with a beautiful paint job and no engine. If Andre wanted to change the height of a railing on the Sterling project, he wouldn't be able to just click and drag. He would have to hire an engineer to redraw the entire thing from zero. And considering Andre thought a caliper was a type of sea creature, I doubted he would figure that out, until it was far too late. I spent the next 4 hours methodically sanitizing the digital footprint of my existence. I removed my custom spreadsheet macros that calculated material waste. I deleted the vendor contact database I had built over 15 years, leaving only the generic main line numbers that went to automated voicemails. I removed the password autofill for the supplier portals. By the time I was finished, the computer was a blank slate. It was exactly what they wanted: clean, efficient, devoid of Zora. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 4:59. Usually I stayed until 7 or 8 at night. I would walk the floor, check the night shift setup, and prepare the schedules for the next day. I lived for this place, but I wasn't the operations manager anymore. I was the inventory lead, and shift work ended strictly at 5. I stood up and put on my jacket. I picked up the box containing my certificates. It felt lighter now, or maybe I was just stronger. I walked out of the office and locked the door. I wouldn't need to go back in there. As I walked across the mezzanine catwalk, I looked down at the shop floor. The day shift crew was starting to clean up. Sparks were dying down. The crane was parking in its bay. Mike looked up and saw me. He did a double take, checking his watch. He looked confused. He had never seen me leave while the machines were still warm. He jogged over to the bottom of the stairs as I descended. "Zora," he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "You heading out? We have a problem with the press brake on line 3. The tolerance is off by a 16th. I need you to look at it." I stopped on the bottom step. I looked at Mike, a man I respected more than my own brother. I felt a twinge of guilt, but I pushed it down. I couldn't save them anymore. Saving them meant enabling the people who were destroying me. "I can't help you, Mike," I said, my voice steady. "What do you mean?" he asked, frowning. "It is a simple fix for you. You just need to adjust the back gauge." I shook my head. "That sounds like an operational issue, Mike. I am just the inventory lead now. Press brake calibration isn't in my job description. You should ask Andre. Or better yet, ask Brittany. I hear she is great at feng shui. Maybe she can rearrange the machine's energy." Mike stared at me, his mouth slightly open. He looked from me to the darkened executive office where Andre was probably pouring his third drink. "You are leaving?" Mike said, realizing the gravity of the situation. You are actually leaving at 5. I checked my watch. It was 5 o'clock on the dot. My shift is over, I said. I am just following orders, cutting costs, eliminating overtime. I adjusted the box in my arms. Good luck with the press break, Mike. I walked past him toward the exit. I could feel the eyes of the entire crew on my back. They weren't judging me. They were witnessing the beginning of the end, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. I pushed open the heavy steel door and stepped out into the parking lot. The cold air hit my face crisp and clean. I didn't look back. I didn't hesitate. I climbed into my truck and placed the box on the passenger seat. As I drove out of the gate, I saw the lights of the shop fading in my rearview mirror. For the first time in 15 years, I was going home while the sun was still setting. I was going home to a quiet apartment, a glass of wine, and the absolute certainty that tomorrow morning, all hell was going to break loose at Banks Custom Metalworks. And I wouldn't be there to fix it. Tuesday morning arrived with a silence that was louder than any machinery. For the first time in 15 years, my internal clock woke me up at 5:30, but I forced myself to stay in bed. I stared at the ceiling fan, counting the rotations, knowing that 5 miles away, chaos was already brewing. I imagined the scene at Banks Custom Metalworks. The first shift would be clocking in, the air compressors would be humming to life, but the brain of the operation was missing. I rolled over and pulled the duvet up to my chin. It wasn't my problem anymore. I was just the inventory lead, and inventory leads didn't start until 9. Or maybe I wouldn't go in at all. I had vacation time accrued that they had never paid out. I decided to take a sick day. A mental health day. Back at the shop, the cracks began to show before the coffee had even finished brewing. My phone started vibrating on the nightstand at 7:15. It was Mike. I didn't answer. Then a text from Sarah, the scheduling coordinator. I didn't open it. By 8 o'clock, I had 17 missed calls from the floor. I turned my phone on silent and went to the kitchen to make a gourmet breakfast, something I hadn't done on a weekday in a decade. From what Mike told me later, the trouble started with the structural H-beams for the downtown parking garage retrofit. It was a standard job on paper, but the metallurgy of this specific batch of steel required a very specific heat treatment. The Welding Procedure Specification, or WPS, was the recipe for the job. It detailed the voltage, the amperage, the travel speed, and the preheat temperature. If you got it wrong, the welds would look fine on the surface, but inside they would be brittle as glass. Mike had walked up to the executive suite holding the work order. He knocked on the glass door. Andre was sitting in my old chair, spinning around and throwing a foam basketball at a mini hoop he had mounted on the wall where my certifications used to hang. Andre Mike said, his voice echoing in the hollow office. We are ready to start the H-beams, but the WPS is missing from the server. The folder just has the PDF of the dimensions. We need the technical specs to set the machines. Andre stopped spinning. He looked at Mike with the annoyance of a man interrupted during important executive leisure time. What do you mean specs, Mike? It is steel. You melt the wire, you stick it together. You have been doing this for 20 years. Figure it out. Mike stood his ground. He was a professional. Boss, the carbon content on this batch is 0.4%. If we run it cold, it will crack. Zora always calculated the preheat temp for us. It is usually in the file. Andre waved a hand dismissively. Zora is gone, Mike. Get over it. She overcomplicated everything to make herself look important. Just do it like we did the last batch. Same settings. It is just a parking garage, not a spaceship. Mike hesitated. To a welder, saying, do it like last time, is like telling a baker to bake a cake without measuring ingredients, because the oven feels right. But Mike had a mortgage. He had 2 kids in college. He looked at the new CEO, who was already looking back at his phone. All right, Mike said. You are the boss. He walked out and told the crew to run the standard settings. They did exactly what they were told. They welded 6 tons of structural steel beams using parameters that were 10% too cold. The beams looked perfect. They were shiny. They were straight. and structurally, they were ticking time bombs. While Andre was busy playing engineering roulette, Brittany was executing her own reign of terror in the front office. Her target was Mrs. Gable, our 60-year-old bookkeeper. Mrs. Gable had been with the company since my father worked out of a garage. She knew every tax loophole, every vendor payment schedule, and most importantly, she knew how to navigate the complex lien waivers required for construction billing. Around 10 o'clock, while I was enjoying a second cup of coffee and watching a cooking show, Brittany marched into the accounting office. She was followed by a young woman who looked like she had just walked off a reality TV set, carrying a toy poodle in a designer bag. Mrs. Gable, Brittany said, clapping her hands together. "We need to have a little chat. We are modernizing the brand. Andre and I feel that the company needs a younger, fresher energy in the front of house." Mrs. Gable adjusted her glasses. "I am the accountant, Brittany. I don't work front of house. I work in the books." Brittany smiled that tight shark-like smile. "Exactly. And the books are so old-fashioned. We are moving to the cloud. My friend Tiffany here is a digital nomad. She is going to take over as Chief Financial Officer." Mrs. Gable looked at Tiffany, who was busy taking a selfie with the filing cabinet. "Does she know how to file a G702 payment application?" Mrs. Gable asked. Brittany rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, stop being so negative. Tiffany has an Instagram following of 50,000 people. She knows business. Pack your things, Mrs. Gable. We will mail your final check." Just like that, 30 years of institutional financial memory walked out the door. Mrs. Gable called me 10 minutes later, crying in her car. "Zora," she sobbed. "They fired me. They gave the bank tokens to a girl who thinks payroll is an app." I listened quietly, sipping my coffee. I felt a pang of guilt, but also a grim satisfaction. "Mrs. Gable," I said gently, "go home. Enjoy your grandchildren. You don't want to be there for what is coming. Trust me, they did you a favor." With Mrs. Gable gone, the financial firewall was down. By Wednesday, Brittany and Tiffany had figured out how to access the operating account. They didn't figure out how to pay the steel suppliers, but they definitely figured out how to order new Herman Miller chairs for the entire executive suite and put a down payment on a company-leased Porsche Cayenne for Andre. The first real tremor of the earthquake hit on Thursday afternoon. It wasn't the big Sterling project yet. It was a smaller order for a local landscaping company. 50 custom wrought iron fence panels. It was a bread and butter job. Simple. Low risk. The delivery truck backed into the loading dock at 3 p.m., usually a time for shipping out, not receiving returns. I was sitting on my couch reading a book when my phone buzzed with a text from one of the guys on the floor. It was a picture. A pile of fence panels dumped on the concrete like scrap metal. The caption read, "Client refused delivery, porosity in every joint, said it looks like a bird pooped on it." I zoomed in on the photo. The welds were terrible. They were full of pinholes. This happened when the shielding gas ran out or the wind blew away the gas coverage. It was a rookie mistake, a mistake a floor supervisor would have caught in the first hour of production. But there was no floor supervisor. The operations manager was gone, and the new inventory lead was at home. Andre came storming out of his office, his face purple with rage. He didn't ask what went wrong. He didn't ask about the gas mixture. He went straight for the jugular. "Who welded this?" he screamed, kicking one of the panels. "Which one of you idiots did this?" The shop went silent. A young kid named Davon stepped forward. He was a new hire, a good kid but inexperienced. "I did." Boss Davon stammered. "I told you the gas regulator looked weird yesterday. I asked for a new one, but you said we had to cut costs and use the old tanks until they were empty." Andre didn't hear him, or chose not to. "You are trying to sabotage me," he yelled, his voice cracking. "You are all lazy. You are incompetent. I am the CEO and I have to deal with this garbage. Rework it. All of it. And you are staying late tonight, unpaid, to fix your mess." Davin threw his welding helmet on the ground. "I quit," he said. "You can't make me work for free. That is illegal." "Get out!" Andre screamed. "Get out of my shop!" Davin walked Two other welders walked out with him in solidarity. That night, the shop was down 3 men. The fence panels were a total loss of $5,000 in materials plus the labor. And the morale was in the toilet. I poured myself a glass of Pinot Noir. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over my living room. For years, my evenings had been filled with panic attacks and answering emails. Now there was just silence. My phone buzzed again. It was my mother. Zora. "Where are you?" she texted. "Andre says the workers are revolting. He says you sabotaged the machines before you left. You need to come in tomorrow and fix this. He is stressed. The baby can feel it. Be a good sister." I looked at the message. I looked at the glass of wine in my hand. The liquid was a deep, rich red. I didn't reply. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt like a spectator in the Colosseum watching the lions circle the gladiators. They wanted me to be the inventory lead. Fine. I would inventory the destruction. I went to my laptop and opened a new browser tab. I wasn't looking for jobs. I was looking for commercial real estate. A small warehouse just on the edge of town had popped up for lease. It was small, only 2,000 square feet, a fraction of Bank's custom metalworks. But it had good power supply, and it was available immediately. I filled out the inquiry form. Name, Zora Banks. Company ZB Steel Solutions. I hit send. Let Andre yell. Let Brittany buy furniture. Let my parents pray for their golden child. The first week was over. They had lost a bookkeeper, 3 welders, and a $5,000 order. Next week, the Sterling Hotel inspection was scheduled. That was a $2 million contract. I took a sip of wine. Monday was going to be a bloodbath. Monday morning arrived with the inevitability of a freight train. While I sat in my pajamas enjoying a second cup of coffee and the unfamiliar silence of my apartment across town, the stage was set for a disaster of operatic proportions. I knew the schedule better than I knew the lines on my own palms. 10 a.m. was etched into my memory. That was when Mr. Sterling was due to arrive. Mr. Sterling was not just a client. He was an institution. He owned a chain of boutique luxury hotels that spanned from Chicago to Miami, and he was a man who appreciated the poetry of steel. The grand staircase for his new flagship property wasn't just a way to get from the lobby to the mezzanine. It was a sculpture. It was a double helix design 20 feet high, requiring brushed bronze and tempered glass. It was the most complex engineering challenge Banks Custom Metalworks had ever undertaken, and it was my baby. I had spent 4 months calculating the load-bearing curves and the heat stress factors. I could only imagine the scene at the shop. Andre probably thought he could handle Sterling. Andre thought business was just about firm handshakes, expensive suits, and using buzzwords like synergy and scalability. He didn't understand that Mr. Sterling could look at a weld bead and tell you the amperage setting used to create it. According to Mike, who texted me a play-by-play later that evening, Sterling rolled up in his black Bentley, exactly at 10 o'clock. He stepped out onto the gravel lot looking immaculate in a charcoal suit flanked by his lead architect and a structural engineer. This wasn't a social call. This was an inspection milestone. If the steel framework wasn't bent to the precise geometry by today, the entire construction schedule of his hotel would be thrown off. Andre greeted him at the door wearing his new suit, sweating slightly despite the chill in the air. Brittany was there too, wearing heels that clicked loudly on the concrete floor, holding a clipboard that I knew for a fact contained nothing but blank paper. "Welcome, Mr. Sterling." Andre boomed, extending a hand. "Great to see you. We are making fantastic progress. The team is really humming along." Sterling didn't smile. He shook Andre's hand briefly and looked past him, scanning the shop floor. He was looking for me. He was looking for the person who actually spoke his language. "Where is Zora?" Sterling asked, his voice cutting through the noise of the shop. "I had some questions about the radius on the third landing." Andre cleared his throat, a nervous tic he had had since childhood. "Ah, yes. Zora. Well, we have made some management changes. Zora is no longer with the executive team. I have taken over direct supervision of the project to ensure the highest quality. Sterling raised an eyebrow. He looked at Andre, then at Brittany, then back to the shop floor. You let your lead engineer go in the middle of a complex fabrication. She is taking some personal time, Brittany chimed in, flashing her brightest, fakest smile. We wanted to make sure the project didn't suffer from any distractions. But don't worry, Andre has an MBA. He is all over it. Sterling didn't look reassured. He looked like a man who had ordered a steak and been served a rubber boot. He walked past them straight toward the layout table, where the massive steel stringers for the staircase were supposed to be assembled. The stringers were massive curved pieces of steel that formed the backbone of the stairs. Bending them required a process called induction bending, where you heat the metal to a specific temperature and bend it slowly. It requires precise calculations. If you get it wrong, the steel springs back, or worse, it ripples. I had cleared the calculations from the server. Sterling walked up to the steel. It was sitting on the sawhorses. It was straight. It was supposed to be curved. Andre, Sterling said, running a hand along the cold, flat steel. Why is this straight? The schedule said induction bending was completed last Friday. We are supposed to be inspecting the curvature today. Andre froze. He looked at the steel as if seeing it for the first time. He had no idea what induction bending was. He probably thought we just hammered it into shape. Well, Andre stammered, loosening his tie. We decided to let the steel rest. You know, to acclimating to the ambient temperature. For precision. Sterling looked at his architect. The architect shook his head, holding back a laugh. Steel doesn't need to rest, Andre, Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave. It is not a steak, it is metal. If this isn't bent, you are 3 days behind schedule. We can bend it today, Andre said quickly. No problem. We will put the guys on it right now. Double time. Sterling turned to him. Show me the heat maps. The what? Andre asked. The heat maps. Sterling repeated, his patience thinning. The induction heating simulations. The ones Zora showed me last month. I need to verify that the heat distribution won't compromise the tensile strength of the alloy. If you bend this cold, it will snap. Show me the files. Andre looked panic-stricken. Files, computers. He understood computers, or so he thought. Absolutely, Andre said, seizing the lifeline. They are right in the office. Let's go look at the models. They marched up the stairs to the executive suite. My old office. The fishbowl. When they entered, Sterling paused. The room had changed. Gone were the drafting tables and the reference manuals. In their place were a beige love seat, a diffusers puffing out lavender mist, and abstract art that looked like spilled paint. Brittany beamed. We redecorated. We wanted a space that fosters creativity. Sterling ignored her. He walked to the computer desk. Andre sat down, his hands trembling slightly as he grabbed the mouse. He logged in. I can picture it perfectly. He would have opened the Sterling project folder. He would have expected to see the complex file structures, the simulation data, the raw AutoCAD files that contained the mathematical soul of the staircase. Instead, he saw a list of PDFs. PDFs are pictures. They are flat. You cannot rotate them. You cannot run simulations on them. You cannot extract heat map data from them. Andre clicked on a file. A static image of the staircase popped up. There, Andre said, pointing at the screen. See? The staircase. Sterling leaned in. That is a picture, Andre. I need the DWG file. I need the 3D model. Open the source file. Andre clicked around. He opened subfolders. Empty. He checked the recycling bin. Empty. He checked the recent files list. Errors. Sweat was now running down the back of his neck. It seems to be loading slowly. Andre lied. Maybe the server is updating. Sterling wasn't buying it. He was a man who built skyscrapers. He knew when someone was stalling. The files aren't there, are they? Sterling asked, his voice deadly quiet. Brittany stepped in, sensing her husband was drowning. She placed a manicured hand on Sterling's arm, a move that was entirely inappropriate and desperate. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, I didn't want to say anything, but this is part of the problem we were having with Zora. She was unstable. She was disorganized. She deleted things by accident. She was having a breakdown, poor thing. That is why we had to let her go, for her own mental health. We are recovering the data, but honestly, her work was sloppy. Andre is going to redo it all better." The room went silent. The lavender diffuser hissed softly in the corner. Sterling looked at Brittany's hand on his arm until she removed it. Then he looked at Andre, who was staring at the screen like it was a bomb. "Zora Banks is the best structural fabricator in the Midwest," Sterling said, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen. "I have worked with her for 5 years. She does not make mistakes, and she is certainly not sloppy. If the files are gone, it is because you lost them." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "I flew my structural engineer in from New York for this meeting," Sterling said. "You have wasted my time. You have wasted my money. And you have unbent steel sitting on your floor 3 weeks before installation." He pulled out his phone. "I am calling Zora." Andre stood up, panic in his eyes. "No, don't bother her. She is in a facility. She can't talk." Sterling ignored him. He dialed my number. He put it on speaker. In my apartment, my phone began to buzz on the coffee table. The screen lit up. "Mr. Sterling, VIP." I looked at it. I took a sip of my coffee. I could pick up. I could tell him I had the files backed up on my external drive. I could tell him I could come in as a consultant and fix the mess. I could save the contract. I could save my parents' house. But then I remembered the meeting last Sunday. I remembered my mother telling me I was just a placeholder. I remembered Andre laughing at my certifications. I remembered Brittany calling my life's work clutter. They wanted to be the bosses. They wanted the glory. Well, heavy is the head that wears the crown. I let it ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Back in the office, the sound of the ringing tone echoed in the silence. Andre and Brittany must have been holding their breath, praying I wouldn't pick up and expose their lies about my facility stay, but also praying I would pick up and save their skins. 4 rings, 5 rings, voicemail. "Hi, you have reached Zora. I am currently unavailable. Please leave a message." Sterling ended the call. He looked at Andre with a look of pure disgust. "You have 24 hours," Sterling said, "to find those files, to bend that steel, and to show me a heat map simulation. If you don't, I am activating the penalty clause in the contract, and I will be looking for a new vendor." "But that is impossible," Andre squeaked. "We can't redo the engineering in 24 hours. That sounds like a CEO problem, not a client problem," Sterling said. He walked out. As soon as the door clicked shut, I can only assume the screaming started. But I didn't hear it. I was busy looking up the lease terms for the small warehouse I had found. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Sterling. "Zora, this is Robert Sterling. I don't know what game your family is playing, but they are drowning. Call me if you want to talk. I don't do business with amateurs." I didn't call him back. Not yet. I needed the desperation to marinate. I needed Andre and Brittany to realize that you cannot charm steel into bending. You cannot bully physics. And you certainly cannot replace competence with arrogance. The first domino had fallen, and it had made a very loud noise. Wednesday was the day gravity finally caught up with Andre's ego. I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 miles away reviewing the lease agreement for my new 2,000 square foot workspace when my phone lit up with a breaking news alert from a local app. It said simply, "Industrial accident at Southside Metal Fabrication Plant." I didn't need to click the link to know which plant it was. I knew exactly what happened, not because I was psychic, but because I knew the laws of physics, and I knew that Andre had fired the people who respected them. According to the police report and the gossip from my old crew, the disaster started at 2 in the afternoon. Andre had been complaining about labor costs, so he had instructed Brittany to hire day laborers from a temp agency to handle material transport. These were guys who had never set foot in a metal shop before. They didn't know the difference between mild steel and tungsten. And they certainly didn't know how to handle compressed gas cylinders. One of the new hires, a kid barely out of high school, was told to move a bank of shielding gas tanks. These are heavy steel cylinders pressurized to 2,000 pounds per square inch. There is a strict protocol for moving them. You never roll them, you never drag them, and you absolutely never move them without the protective steel cap screwed over the valve. I had written that protocol. I had trained every single employee on it for 15 years. But the kid didn't know. And the floor supervisor who would have stopped him had walked out 3 days ago. The kid tried to tilt a tank of argon gas to roll it across the concrete. His hands were greasy because nobody had issued him proper gloves. The tank slipped. It fell over. When a cylinder falls, the brass valve at the top is the weak point. If it snaps off, the tank ceases to be a storage vessel and becomes a torpedo. The valve sheared off. The tank took flight. It shot across the shop floor, powered by escaping gas, screaming like a banshee. It punched a hole through a cinder block wall, flew through the break room, and finally embedded itself in the relentless steel frame of the hydraulic press. Miraculously, nobody was killed. The break room was empty. The kid had jumped out of the way. But the explosion of sound and the destruction of the facility wall brought the entire neighborhood to a standstill. Fire trucks arrived within 4 minutes. Police arrived in 6. And then 30 minutes later, the white government sedan of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration pulled up. OSHA inspectors do not run. They walk with the terrifying slowness of people who know they have absolute power. I wasn't there to see Andre's face, but Mike told me later it was the color of curdled milk. Andre was standing in the parking lot amidst the flashing lights of the fire trucks, trying to explain to a fire marshal that it was just a little mishap. Then the OSHA inspector approached. His name was Officer Miller. I knew him. He was a strict man, a man who measured safety railings to the millimeter. He had inspected us 3 years ago and gave us a perfect score because I walked him through every protocol myself. He didn't look happy to be back. "Who is the person in charge here?" Miller asked, holding a clipboard that looked like a weapon. Andre stepped forward, adjusting his suit jacket, which was now covered in drywall dust. "I am Andre Banks, CEO." Miller didn't shake his hand. He looked at the hole in the wall. He looked at the shattered remains of the gas cylinder. Then he looked at the terrified temp worker sitting in the back of an ambulance. "Mr. Banks," Miller said, his voice flat. "This is a catastrophic failure of safety protocol. I need to see your hazard communication logs, your training records for that employee, and I need to speak to your designated safety officer immediately." Andre blinked. "Safety officer? Well, that would be me. As CEO, I oversee everything." Miller narrowed his eyes. He flipped through the pages on his clipboard. "According to my records, the licensed safety officer for this facility, the person holding the OSHA 30-hour general industry certification and the hazmat handling license, is a Miss Zora Banks." Andre swallowed hard. "Zora is unavailable. She is no longer with the company. I have assumed her duties." Miller stopped writing. He looked up slowly. "You have assumed her duties. Do you have an OSHA 30-hour card?" "Well, no," Andre stammered. "But I have an MBA. I understand management." Miller let out a short, humorless laugh. "An MBA does not teach you how to contain pressurized gas, Mr. Banks. Federal law requires a certified, competent person to be on site during all hazardous operations. You just told me you fired your competent person and replaced her with yourself, an unlicensed, untrained individual." Brittany tried to intervene. She stepped up, flashing a smile that was completely out of place in a disaster zone. "Officer, surely we can work this out. It was just an accident. The employee was clumsy. We shouldn't be punished for his mistake." Miller turned his cold gaze to her. "Ma'am, this isn't a parking ticket. You have a pressurized vessel that just turned into a missile. You have an untrained worker handling hazardous materials. And you are operating a heavy industrial facility without a licensed safety director. This isn't a mistake. This is negligence." He turned back to Andre. "Since Zora Banks is not here and you are unable to provide proof of certification, I am classifying this site as an imminent danger zone." He took a bright orange tag out of his pocket. It was the color of a traffic cone, but infinitely more dangerous. "I am issuing a stop work order, effective immediately," Miller said. He walked over to the main power disconnect for the building and slapped the tag on it. "Nobody touches a machine. Nobody welds a bead. Nobody moves a box until a certified safety officer conducts a full investigation and submits a corrective action plan." "But," Andre gasped, "we have deadlines. The Sterling Hotel project. We can't stop." "You should have thought of that before you let your safety officer go," Miller said. He wasn't done. He started writing citations. Citation 1. Failure to train employees on hazardous materials. Penalty $12,000. Citation 2. Improper storage of compressed gas. Penalty $10,000. Citation 3. Operating without a competent safety person. Penalty $13,000. He kept writing. The pen scratched loudly against the paper. By the time he handed the stack of violations to Andre, the total fines amounted to $52,000. And the shutdown order was for a minimum of 7 business days. Andre stood there holding the yellow carbon copies, his hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. $50,000. That was more cash than they had in the operating account. That was the money Brittany had earmarked for the office renovation. That was the money for the lease on the Porsche. "This is insane!" Brittany shrieked, her voice cracking. "You can't do this. We will sue you." Miller just looked at her. "You can appeal in court, ma'am. But the tag stays. If I see one person working in this shop before you are recertified, I will have you arrested for federal safety violations. Have a nice day." He walked away. The fire trucks began to pack up, leaving the gaping hole in the wall as a monument to Andre's incompetence. I watched the news report from my phone screen. The helicopter shot showed the shop dark and silent. The orange tag on the door was visible even from the air. My phone began to ring. It was my father, Otis. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. My mother, Viola. I declined the call. Then the text messages started pouring in. "Zora. Please pick up. It is an emergency. The government shut us down. Zora. They fined us 50 grand. We don't have it. Zora. Tell them you still work here. Please just come talk to the inspector. They know you. They will listen to you." I sat there watching the messages stack up. For 15 years I had been the shield. I had been the one who double-checked the valves. I had been the one who stayed late to train the new guys. I had been the one who walked the inspectors through the plant, making sure they saw our professionalism. My parents had never thanked me. They had called me bossy. They had called me obsessive. They had told me I worried too much. Now they were seeing what the world looked like without my worry. Another text from my mother. "Your brother is crying, Zora. He is terrified. How can you be so cold? This is your family's legacy." I took a sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm now, but it tasted like victory. It wasn't my legacy anymore. They had made that very clear when they handed the deed to Andre. It was his legacy now. And apparently his legacy was a hole in the wall and a $50,000 fine. I typed a single response to my mother. It was the first time I had replied in 4 days. I sent her the contact information for a freelance safety consultant I knew, a man who charged $300 an hour. Then I blocked her number for the night. I had a warehouse to lease. I had equipment to order. I had a business to build. And unlike Bank's custom metalworks, my business was going to be safe. It was going to be legal. And it was going to be mine. The phone vibrating on my coffee table sounded like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. It was my father, Otis, calling for the 5th time in 10 minutes. I watched the screen light up and fade to black, only to light up again 3 seconds later. I sat there in the dim light of my apartment, looking at the name on the screen. Dad. A word that used to mean safety and strength, but now just meant disappointment. I took a long, slow sip of my wine. The heavy tannins of the Pinot Noir coated my tongue, grounding me. I knew I didn't have to answer. I was not an employee. I was not a partner. According to the paperwork they had so eagerly signed, I was nothing. But a small part of me, the part that had spent 35 years trying to earn his approval, needed to hear it. I needed to hear him admit that he was wrong. I needed to hear him realize that his golden son had led them off a cliff. I reached out and tapped the green accept button. I didn't say hello. I didn't say a word. I just held the phone to my ear and waited. You ungrateful little traitor. My father's voice exploded through the speaker so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. He wasn't crying. He wasn't apologizing. He was screaming. It was a guttural, raw sound of a man who had lost control and was looking for someone to blame. You want to kill us, is that it, Zora? You want to see your mother on the street. You want to see your brother in jail. Is this how you repay us for raising you, for putting a roof over your head? I sat the wine glass down gently on a coaster. The calmness in my voice surprised even me. It was the calm of a surgeon standing over a patient who refused to take their medicine. I am not doing anything, Dad, I said softly. I am sitting in my living room. I am minding my own business. You are the ones running the shop, or at least trying to. Don't play dumb with me, he roared. The inspector just left Zora. He slapped a $50,000 fine on us. He shut down the power. He said we are operating illegally because the safety officer is missing. Bring the papers back, Zora. Bring them back tonight. I let out a sigh that rattled in my chest. He still didn't get it. He truly believed that the certifications were just pieces of paper like a deed or a receipt. He thought they were property that belonged to the building, not proofs of competence that belonged to the human being. Dad listened to me very carefully, I said, speaking slowly as if to a child. I cannot bring the papers back because the papers are useless without me. Those certificates are issued to Zora Banks, not to Banks Custom Metalworks. They certify that I have passed the exams, that I have the hours, that I know the codes. I don't care about the technicalities, he interrupted, his voice shaking with rage. Just give them to Andre, sign them over, write a letter. Do whatever you have to do to get that orange tag off the door. We have the Sterling deadline in 4 days. If we don't restart production tomorrow, we lose everything. I leaned back in my sofa, closing my eyes. The level of delusion was breathtaking. I can't sign them over, Dad, I said, my voice hardening. That is not how it works. You can't sign over a medical license. You can't sign over a driver's license. Andre is the CEO now. If he wants to be the safety officer, he needs to do the work. What work? Otis scoffed. It is just common sense. Andre has common sense. It is not common sense, Dad. It is federal law. If Andre wants those certifications, he needs to log 4 years of documented field experience. Then, he needs to take a 30-hour course. Then he needs to pass a 200-question exam that covers chemical hygiene, confined space entry, and electrical lockout-tagout procedures. I paused, letting the timeline sink in. So if he starts tomorrow and passes everything on the first try, he should be legally allowed to reopen the shop sometime in 2029. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a heavy, suffocating silence. I could hear his breathing, ragged and shallow. I could hear the background noise of the shop, the shouts of confusion, the beep of a forklift backing up in the yard. For a second, I thought maybe he understood. Maybe the reality of what they had done was finally breaking through the wall of his pride. But then I heard a scuffle, a sharp voice, and then the phone was snatched away. You represent everything that is wrong with women today, Zora. It was Brittany. Her voice was shrill, piercing through the speaker like an ice pick. She wasn't hysterical like my father. She was vicious. Excuse me, I said, opening my eyes. You heard me, Brittany spat. You are selfish, you are bitter, and you are jealous. That is what this is really about, isn't it? You can't stand that Andre is happy. You can't stand that he has a wife who loves him and a baby on the way while you sit alone in that sad little apartment with your cats. I looked around my apartment. It wasn't sad. It was clean. It was quiet. It was paid for with my own money. And most importantly, it was free of them. This has nothing to do with jealousy, Brittany, I said. This has to do with physics and the law. Andre hired an untrained kid. The kid blew up a gas tank. That is negligence. Oh, stop with the technical jargon, she screamed. You did this on purpose. You knew this would happen. You set him up to fail. You probably loosened that valve yourself before you left. I sat up straight, my knuckles turning white as I gripped the phone. That accusation was low even for her. I would never compromise safety, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I spent 15 years keeping that shop accident-free. Andre managed to blow a hole in the wall in 4 days. That is not sabotage, Brittany. That is incompetence. You are a monster, she hissed. We are going to sue you. We are going to sue you for theft of company property. We are going to sue you for emotional distress. We are going to take every penny you have, Zora. You think you are so smart with your little plan. But you are going to end up with nothing. No family, no money, no career. I listened to her threats. A week ago, they would have terrified me. A week ago, the thought of losing my family would have brought me to my knees. But as she screamed, something snapped inside me. The last tether of obligation finally broke. I realized I didn't hate her. I didn't even pity her. I just didn't care anymore. She was a drowning woman trying to pull me under to save herself, and I was standing on dry land. Are you done? I asked calmly, cutting off her tirade about how I was ruining her baby's future. What? She paused, caught off guard by my lack of reaction. I asked if you were done screaming, I said, because I have a lot of work to do. Unlike Andre, I actually have a business to run. You don't have a business. She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. You are unemployed, Zora. You are nothing without the bank's name. I smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. Keep telling yourself that, Brittany. And tell Andre good luck with the OSHA hearing. He is going to need a really good lawyer. Oh wait, you can't use the company lawyer because the company accounts are frozen due to the federal lien. You bitch, she screamed. Goodbye, Brittany. Goodbye, Dad. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could still hear her screaming my name, tinny and distant. I pressed the red end call button. The silence that rushed back into the room was beautiful. I didn't stop there. I went into my contacts. I selected Dad. Block caller. I selected Mom. Block caller. I selected Andre. Block caller. And finally, I selected Brittany. Block caller. I put the phone down on the table face down. My hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally severing the limb that had been poisoning me for decades. It hurt. Of course it hurt. They were my blood. But gangrene is blood too, and you still have to cut it out to survive. I picked up my wine glass and walked to the window. Below me, the city of Chicago was lighting up the grid of streets, stretching out like a circuit board. Somewhere out there in that grid was a small, empty warehouse with my name on the lease. Somewhere out there were clients like Mr. Sterling who valued skill over bloodlines. I took a sip of wine. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I wasn't the sister. I wasn't the safety net. I was Zora Banks, CEO, of ZB Steel Solutions, and for the first time in my life, I was completely, entirely free. The deadline Mr. Sterling gave my brother came and went on Thursday morning. The silence from the Sterling headquarters was not the quiet of peace, but the intake of breath before a scream. While I was busy finalizing the insurance paperwork for my new venture across town at Banks Custom Metalworks, the atmosphere was toxic enough to peel the paint off the walls. According to Mike, who was still unfortunately employed there for another few days, the executioner arrived at 10 o'clock sharp on Friday. It wasn't Mr. Sterling himself. Men like Robert Sterling do not deliver bad news in person. They hire professionals for that. A process server in a nondescript sedan walked past the orange OSHA warning tag on the door, walked past the silent machines, and walked straight into the executive suite. He handed Andre a thick envelope. He didn't say have a nice day, he just said you have been served. Andre opened the packet in front of my parents and Brittany. Inside was a lawsuit filed in the Superior Court. It was a masterpiece of legal destruction. Mr. Sterling wasn't just canceling the contract. He was suing for material breach of contract, fraudulent misrepresentation of capabilities, and negligence. The demand was staggering. He wanted the immediate return of the $500,000 deposit he had wired 2 weeks ago. He wanted an additional $200,000 in liquidated damages for the delay which had pushed back his hotel opening. And he was placing a lien on the company's assets until the debt was paid. I can only imagine the color draining from my father's face. Otis Banks had spent 40 years building a reputation for handshake deals and honest work. Now, in less than 2 weeks of his son's leadership, the company was being sued for fraud. But the real horror wasn't the lawsuit itself, it was the math. Otis turned to Andre, his voice shaking. "It is okay, son. It is a disaster, but we can fix it. We just need to wire the deposit back. We haven't spent the material money yet because we haven't ordered the steel. Just send him the $500,000 back, and we will beg for a payment plan on the damages." Andre looked at the floor. He didn't move toward the computer. Otis slammed his hand on the table. "Andre, I said log into the operating account and wire the money. We need to stop the bleeding before they freeze our assets." Andre looked up, his eyes wild with panic. He looked at Brittany, who was sitting in the corner nervously picking at a loose thread on her designer dress. We can't wire it back, Dad," Andre whispered. "Why not?" Otis demanded. "Because the account is overdrawn," Andre said. The silence that followed must have been deafening. "Overdrawn, my mother?" Viola asked, her voice trembling. "How can it be overdrawn? There was $600,000 in cash in that account 10 days ago. The Sterling deposit plus the reserve operating capital. Zora left us with a healthy balance." Andre didn't answer. He just pointed a shaking finger at his wife. "Ask the CFO. Ask Brittany." All eyes turned to Brittany. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, trying to summon the arrogance that had served her so well until this moment. "Don't look at me like that," she snapped. "I made executive decisions. We needed to rebrand. We needed to look successful to attract high-end clients." Otis walked over to the computer and shoved Andre out of the chair. He logged into the bank portal, his password fingers fumbling. When the screen loaded, I imagine he felt like he was having a heart attack. The balance was negative $4,000. Otis began to read the transaction history out loud, his voice rising with every line item. $11,000 to Herman Miller Office Solutions. $8,000 to Luxury Imports of Chicago for a lease down payment. $4,000 to Tiffany Styles Consulting. $15,000 to Nordstrom Personal Shopper Services. He scrolled down. The list went on and on. Expensive dinners. A corporate retreat booking to Cabo San Lucas that hadn't even happened yet. New MacBooks for everyone, including Brittany's friend. "You spent it all," Otis whispered, turning to look at his daughter-in-law. "You spent the client's deposit. That is embezzlement, Brittany. That is not rebranding. That is a felony." Brittany crossed her arms. I did it for us. You can't expect Andre to be a CEO driving a truck. Image is everything. Besides, we were going to make it back once the Sterling project paid out. Zora is the one who ruined it by deleting the files. This is her fault. My mother Viola, who had defended Brittany for years, who had pushed me aside to welcome this woman into the family, finally snapped. She walked over and slapped the table. Zora didn't force you to buy $5,000 worth of handbags on the company card, Brittany. You stole from us. You stole from the Sterling deposit. Andre stood up then. The pressure was finally too much. The golden child was tarnished broke and facing a lawsuit that would bankrupt him, and he realized he was married to the anchor that was dragging him down. He walked over to Brittany. For a moment he looked like the brother I used to know, the one who had a temper but kept it hidden. But the stress had stripped away his veneer of civilization. You told me you were managing the cash flow. Andre screamed, his face inches from hers. You told me Tiffany was an expert. You blew $500,000 in 2 weeks. Brittany didn't back down. She sneered at him. Oh, please, Andre, don't act like you didn't enjoy the new car. You are just a weak little man. You couldn't run this shop. Zora ran circles around you and you know it. You needed me to feel big. That was the breaking point. Andre's hand moved before he could think. A sharp cracking sound echoed through the office as his palm connected with Brittany's cheek. It wasn't a push. It was a slap. A hard, vicious strike born of humiliation and impotence. Brittany stumbled back, clutching her face. The room froze. My parents gasped. Violence had never been part of the bank's household. Emotional neglect, yes. Sexism, absolutely. But physical violence was a line that had never been crossed. Brittany looked up. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were dry and hard as flint. She saw the opportunity. She saw the exit strategy. She pulled out her phone and held it up. I hope you enjoyed that, Andre, she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. Because that is the last thing you will ever do as a free man. I am filing for divorce. I am filing a police report for domestic battery. And I am going to tell everyone, the press, the clients, the church, that the CEO of Banks Metalworks is a wife beater. Brittany, my mother, pleaded, reaching out. He didn't mean it. He is just stressed. Please think of the baby. Brittany laughed. Oh, I am thinking of the baby. I am thinking this baby needs a mother who gets sole custody and massive alimony. She grabbed her purse, one of the ones purchased with the stolen deposit money, and stormed out of the office. Andre collapsed into the chair, putting his head in his hands. But the universe wasn't done with them yet. An hour later, another courier arrived. This one wasn't from a lawyer. It was from the First National Bank of Chicago. Otis opened the letter. His hands were shaking so badly he tore the paper. It was a notice of acceleration and intent to foreclose. The bank had gotten wind of the OSHA shutdown. They had seen the sudden massive outflow of cash to non-business vendors. Their risk algorithms had flagged the account. And because the business loan for the shop machinery was cross-collateralized with my parents' personal home mortgage, a deal they had signed 10 years ago to expand the business the bank was calling in everything. Because the business was now technically in default due to the cessation of operations and the lawsuit, the bank was exercising its right to seize assets. Otis read the letter out loud, his voice sounding like a ghost. Unless the full balance of the business line of credit totaling $1.2 million is paid within 30 days, the bank will initiate foreclosure proceedings on the commercial property, located at 1500 Industrial Way, and the residential property located at 42 Maple Drive. Viola sank onto the sofa, the same beige love seat Brittany had bought to soften the energy. Our house, she whispered. They are taking our house, Otis. Otis looked at Andre, his son, his heir, the boy he had chosen over me. Andre was staring blankly at the wall, muttering to himself, It is not my fault. It is Zora's fault. She set me up. Otis walked over to his son. For the first time in his life, he didn't offer comfort. He didn't offer excuses. He looked at Andre with pure, unadulterated disgust. Zora didn't spend the money, Andre. Zora didn't slap your wife. Zora isn't the one who forgot to pay the bank. Otis turned away, walking to the window to look out at his silent, broken factory. Call Zora, Viola wept. Call her. She has money. She has savings. She can bail us out. Otis laughed, a dry, cracking sound. She blocked us, Viola. She blocked us all. And frankly, if I were her, I would watch us burn too. While they sat in the ruins of their empire, I was 5 miles away signing the lease on my new warehouse. The ink flowed smoothly from my pen. My hand was steady. I had just ordered a new CNC plasma cutter. I had hired Mike and 3 of the best welders who had walked out. We started work on Monday. I didn't know about the slap or the foreclosure letter yet, but I could feel the shift in the air. The balance of the universe was correcting itself. They had wanted the business. They had wanted the responsibility. Now they had it. They had all the debt, all the lawsuits, and all the misery. And I had the one thing they could never buy, steal, or inherit. I had my freedom. And I was just getting started. 3 months is a long time in the world of industrial fabrication. In 3 months, rust can eat through an untreated beam. In 3 months, a season can change from the biting frost of winter to the tentative thaw of spring. And in 3 months, a woman who walked out of her family's legacy with nothing but a box of certificates can build a new kingdom from scratch. My new kingdom was not a sprawling factory with 50,000 square feet of floor space. It was a modest 2,000 square foot unit in an industrial park on the west side of the city. It didn't have a receptionist. It didn't have a break room with vending machines. It didn't have a designated executive parking spot. But it had something Banks Custom Metalworks had lost long ago. It had a soul. I named it ZB Steel Solutions. I kept the name simple because I didn't need a flashy brand. I needed a name that fit on a business card and on the bottom of an invoice. The morning sun was streaming through the skylights, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I adjusted my welding helmet, flipped the visor down, and pressed the pedal. The TIG torch in my hand hissed a sound like a compressed whisper as the electric arc jumped to the stainless steel. I was working on the final railing section for the Sterling Hotel. Yes, Mr. Sterling had found me. It took him exactly 48 hours after my family failed to produce the files. He didn't sue me. He didn't blame me. He did what any smart businessman would do. He tracked down the talent. He had driven his Bentley to this dusty industrial park when I was still sweeping cobwebs out of the corners. He walked in, looked at my solitary welding rig, and asked if I could deliver the staircase in 60 days. I told him I could do it in 45 if he paid 50% up front. He wrote the check on the spot. That check alone was worth more than 2 years of my salary at the old shop. I finished the bead, lifting the torch. The weld was perfect. A row of dimes, as we call it in the trade. Uniform, shiny, and structurally sound. I flipped my visor up and took a deep breath of the ozone-scented air. Hey boss, looks like the delivery truck is here with the naval brass. I turned to see Mike walking through the bay door. He was smiling. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. Mike had quit Banks Custom Metalworks 3 days after the OSHA shutdown. He had called me asking if I knew anyone hiring. I told him to show up on Monday and bring his favorite hammer. He wasn't the only one. When word got out that Zora Banks was back in business, my phone didn't stop ringing. I hired the 3 best fabricators from the old crew. We were a lean team, 5 people total, no middle management, no HR director buying designer handbags, just 5 master craftsmen doing high-end, high-margin work. Bring it in, Mike, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. And check the alloy stamps. I don't want any surprises. Mike laughed. You got it, Zora. Man, it is nice to work for someone who knows that brass isn't just shiny gold steel. I watched him walk away. The atmosphere in the shop was light. We played music. We took breaks when we needed to. We didn't have screaming matches in the office. We just worked. And the work paid. Without the bloat of my family's lifestyle, without the country club memberships and the leased luxury cars, the profit margins were staggering. In my first month of operation, after paying Mike and the crew significantly more than they made before and after paying rent and materials, I had cleared $20,000 in pure profit. By month 3, we were turning away work because we were booked solid. I walked into my small office. It was really just a cubicle partitioned off from the shop floor by a glass wall. It was messy. It was covered in blueprints and material samples. It smelled of coffee and hard work. It was beautiful. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The banking interface loaded. I looked at the balance. It was a number that made me feel safe. It was freedom. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mr. Sterling. Architect is blown away by the install photos. You saved the opening gala, Zora. Expect a bonus. I smiled. I didn't need the bonus, but I would take it. I would put it back into the business. I was eyeing a new 5-axis water jet cutter that would let us do intricate architectural screens. A horn honked outside, the mail carrier. I walked out to the mailbox at the curb. The air was crisp. I felt light. I felt unburdened. I pulled a stack of envelopes out of the box. An invoice for argon gas, a flyer for a pizza place, a catalog for welding supplies, and a thick, heavy envelope from the First National Bank of Chicago. I froze. My name was on it, but the address was my new shop. That meant they had run a skip trace to find me. Or more likely because I was now a registered business entity in the same industry. I was on the automated mailing list for asset liquidations. I tore open the envelope. Inside was a glossy brochure. It was an invitation to a public auction. Commercial Industrial Liquidation Event, the bold red letters proclaimed. I unfolded the brochure, and there it was. A photo of 1500 Industrial Way. My childhood. My training ground. My prison. The photo must have been taken recently. The building looked sad. The landscaping was overgrown. The sign that said Banks Custom Metalworks was missing the letter B and the letter K, so it just read, Anks Custom Metalworks S. I read the fine print. Pursuant to a judgment of foreclosure, all assets, real estate, machinery, and intellectual property of Banks Custom Metalworks Incorporated will be sold to the highest bidder. Date, November 15th. Starting bid for the real estate, $400,000. Starting bid for the machinery lot, $100,000. I stared at the numbers. 400,000. That was less than the land value alone. The bank just wanted to dump it. They wanted to recoup their losses from the bad loans my parents had taken out to fuel Andre's delusions. I looked at the machinery list. The hydraulic press brake, the shear, the overhead crane, overhead. Machines I had maintained with my own hands. Machines I had named. They were being sold for scrap prices. A feeling washed over me. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't pity. It was something sharper. It was opportunity. I walked back into the shop. Mike was cutting a piece of brass, sparks flying in a golden arc. "Hey, Mike!" I called out. He turned off the saw and lifted his visor. "Yeah, boss." I held up the brochure. "How would you feel about moving into a bigger shop next month?" Mike squinted at the paper. He recognized the building immediately. His eyes went wide. Are they selling it?" Everything I said. Lock, stock, and barrel. Mike let out a low whistle. "That is tragic. I mean, I hate Andre, but your dad built that place." "My dad built the walls," I corrected him. "I built the business. And now I have the chance to buy the walls back for pennies on the dollar." I walked back to my office and sat down. I pulled up my business plan. I pulled up my bank accounts. I pulled up the loan pre-approval letter I had received last week based on the Sterling contract revenue. I did the math. If I bought the old shop, I would have 10 times the capacity. I could take on the naval contract that I had to turn down last week. I could hire back the rest of the crew who were currently driving Uber or working fast food. But more than that, there was a poetic justice to it that made my heart race. My parents had told me I wasn't an owner. They had told me I was just a worker. They had kicked me out to make room for a son who knew nothing. And now, their failure had set the price tag for my expansion. I picked up my pen and circled the date. November 15th. I wasn't just going to attend that auction, I was going to own it. I looked at the phone. I wondered if my parents knew. I wondered if they were packing boxes right now. I wondered if Andre was still blaming me, or if the reality of his incompetence had finally crushed him. It didn't matter. I was done wondering about them. I was focused on the acquisition. I opened my email and drafted a message to my banker. Subject: Acquisition Capital Request. Urgent. I typed quickly, my fingers flying across the keys. I attached the sterling contract. I attached my profit and loss statement. I hit send. Then I walked back out to the shop floor. Mike, I said, finish that railing. We have a lot of work to do. We need to look sharp. Why? Mike asked. Because, I said, grinning as I lowered my welding helmet. We are going shopping. The rain started falling around 8 o'clock that night, turning the streets of Chicago into slick mirrors reflecting the streetlights. I was sitting at my kitchen island, reviewing the final bank draft for tomorrow's auction. My limit was set. My financing was secured. I was ready to buy back my history, not to relive it, but to rewrite it. The only sound in my apartment was the hum of the refrigerator and the soft patter of rain against the window. It was the sound of peace. It was the sound of a life that belonged wholly and completely to me. Then the pounding started. It wasn't a knock. It was a desperate, frantic hammering that shook the heavy oak door in its frame. I didn't jump. I didn't panic. I just took a sip of my tea and picked up my phone to check the security camera feed. There they were. A huddled mass of wet coats and misery standing on my welcome mat. My father Otis looked like he had aged 20 years in 3 months. His shoulders were slumped, and his hat was pulled low against the rain. My mother Viola was clinging to his arm, her face a mask of tragic hope. Behind them stood Andre, looking less like a CEO and more like a frightened child who had broken a neighbor's window. And next to him, holding an umbrella that was doing little to protect her from the wind, was Brittany. I watched them for a moment on the small screen. Part of me wanted to leave them there. Part of me wanted to turn off the lights and go to bed, letting the rain wash them away. But I knew they wouldn't leave. Desperation makes people stubborn. And besides, I needed them to see me. I needed them to see that the woman they had discarded was the only one standing dry and warm while they drowned. I walked to the door and unlocked the deadbolt. I didn't undo the chain. I opened the door 2 inches. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice cutting through the noise of the rain. "Zora." "Oh, thank God." My mother pushed her face toward the crack in the door. Her makeup was running and her eyes were red. "Zora, please let us in. It is freezing out here. We need to talk. It is a family emergency." I looked at her. I looked at the rain dripping off her nose. "I don't have a family," I said calmly. "I have a business to run and I have an early morning tomorrow. Go home. Wait, Zora, please. It was my father." His voice was cracked and broken. "We know about the contract. We saw the press release about the Sterling Hotel opening. We know you did the staircase. We know he paid you. So that was it. They weren't here for reconciliation. They were here because they smelled money. They had sniffed out my success like sharks smelling blood in the water." "I earned that money, Dad," I said. "It is in my business account. It has nothing to do with you." "Zora, listen to reason." My mother pleaded, jamming her hand into the gap so I couldn't close the door. "The bank is taking everything tomorrow. The house, the shop, your father's truck, everything. We are going to be on the street. Andre is going to be bankrupt. He has a baby coming, Zora. Your nephew. You can't let your nephew be born into poverty." I looked at Brittany. She was rubbing her pregnant belly, staring at me with a mixture of hatred and calculation. She didn't look humble. She looked entitled. "I warned you," I said. "I told you 3 months ago what would happen. I told you that you couldn't run a shop without certifications. I told you that spending the deposit money was theft. You didn't listen. We made mistakes. Andre spoke up from the back. His voice was barely a whisper. We messed up, Zora. Okay, I admit it, I messed up. I wasn't ready. You didn't just mess up, Andre, I said. You destroyed 40 years of work in 12 weeks. That takes a special kind of talent. Zora. Please, my mother sobbed. We have a proposal. We talked about it in the car. If you pay off the lien, if you give the bank the $1.2 million to stop the foreclosure, we will make it right. We will give you your job back. I froze. I actually laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that startled them. You will give me my job back, I repeated. Yes. My mother nodded eagerly, thinking she had found the negotiation point. We will reinstate you as operations manager. You can run the floor again. We will even give you a raise, $50,000 a year. And Andre will stay on as CEO, but he will listen to you this time. We will be a family again. I stared at them in disbelief. Even at the edge of the abyss, they still clung to their delusion. They still believed they had something I wanted. They thought the privilege of making money for Andre was a gift they could bestow. Let me get this straight, I said, pushing the door slightly to look my mother in the eye. You want me to take $1.2 million of my own money I earned with my own sweat, and use it to pay off your debts. And in exchange, you will let me work for $50,000 a year under the brother who drove the company into the ground. Yes, my father said. It is fair, Zora. It keeps the business in the family name. It saves Andre's reputation. And eventually when I die, you will get a share. I looked at Andre. He was looking at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze. No, I said. What? My mother gasped. No, I said louder. I am not paying your debts. I am not saving your house. And I would rather burn every single dollar I have in the parking lot than work for Andre Banks ever again. But you are rich now, Brittany shouted, stepping forward. You have the sterling money. You have the naval contract. We know you do. You are hoarding it while we suffer. You are selfish. I am not hoarding it, Brittany, I said, cold as ice. I am investing it. I am buying equipment. I am paying my employees good wages. Employees that you fired. Zora, be reasonable. My father stepped in, trying to use his command voice but failing. You are a woman. You don't need all that money. You are alone. Andre has a family. It is your duty to help him. My duty ended the day you handed him the deed, I said. You bet on the wrong horse, Dad. Now you have to walk home. I started to close the door, but my mother threw her weight against it, wailing. No, Zora, no. You can't do this. You are killing us. You are killing your parents. I am not killing you, Mom, I said, pushing back against the wood. I am just letting you live with the consequences of your actions. It is called adulthood. You should try it sometime. Suddenly, Brittany let out a scream. It wasn't a scream of pain, it was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage directed not at me, but at them. Stop begging her, she yelled. She isn't going to help. I told you she was a bitch. Brittany, watch your language. My mother gasped. Oh, shut up, you old hag, Brittany snapped, turning on my mother. This is your fault. All of it. You told me Andre was a genius. You told me the company was a gold mine. You told me I would be living in a mansion. She turned to Andre and shoved him hard in the chest. And you? You useless, pathetic loser? You lied to me. You said you ran the place. You said Zora was just a helper. You didn't tell me she was the brains. You didn't tell me you were too stupid to turn on a computer. Brittany, please, Andre stammered, trying to grab her hand. The neighbors. Screw the neighbors, she shrieked, slapping his hand away. Look at me. I am pregnant. I am living in a house that is being foreclosed on tomorrow. My car is being repossessed. And it is all because your mommy and daddy raised a spoiled brat who can't tie his own shoes without help. She looked at Otis. You are a terrible father. You saw your daughter doing all the work for 15 years, and you spat in her face because she wasn't a boy. Well, congratulations. Your boy ruined you. I hope you enjoy the homeless shelter. Brittany. That is enough, my father roared. No, it isn't enough, she yelled back. I am leaving. I am going back to my mother's house. And don't think you are seeing this baby. I am not letting my child near a family of failures. She turned and marched down the steps into the rain, not looking back. Andre stood there stunned, watching his wife leave him. My parents stood there shocked into silence by the truth that had just been vomited all over my porch. I watched them. The tableau of their destruction was complete. They had turned on each other just as I knew they would. Go home, Andre, I said softly. Go chase your wife. She is the only thing you have left, and frankly, you probably can't afford the alimony. Zora. Please, my mother whispered one last time, leaning her forehead against the doorframe. Just a loan. 10,000, just enough to get a hotel. I looked at her. I remembered the day 3 months ago when she told me I didn't have the executive presence to lead. I remembered her telling me to clear out my office. I don't lend money to strangers, I said. I tried to close the door again, but my father put his foot in the jam. I am not leaving, he said, his face twisting into an ugly mask of entitlement. I am your father. This is your house. I have a right to come in out of the rain. Open this door, Zora, or I will kick it down. I looked at his foot. I looked at his face. The mask had slipped completely. There was no love there, only possession. He didn't see a daughter. He saw a resource that was refusing to yield. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I didn't dial a family friend. I dialed 3 digits. 911. What are you doing? My mother asked, eyes wide. Operator, police, please, I said loudly into the phone, ensuring they could hear me. Yes, I have 3 intruders on my front porch at 4205 West Oak. They are refusing to leave and threatening to kick down my door. Yes, I am alone. Yes, I feel threatened. You are calling the cops on your own parents. Andre gasped. You are sick. I am calling the police on trespassers, I said to him. You have 3 minutes before the patrol car gets here. I suggest you start running. My father looked at me with pure hatred. For a second I thought he really would kick the door down. I tensed, ready to fight. But then the sound of a siren cut through the night air, wailing in the distance. He pulled his foot back. You are dead to us, he spat. I smiled as I slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. I was already dead to you, Dad, I whispered to the empty hallway. I died the day you chose a gender over a child. Today I was just resurrected. I watched on the monitor as they scrambled down the walkway, retreating into the rain just as the blue lights of the police cruiser swept across the lawn. They didn't stop to talk to the officers. They jumped into my father's old sedan and sped away. I thanked the dispatcher and hung up. I walked back to the kitchen. My tea was cold. I poured it down the sink. I went to the cabinet and pulled out a bottle of champagne. I wasn't much of a drinker, but tonight felt like an occasion. I popped the cork. The sound was like a gunshot, a final punctuation mark to the chapter of my life titled Banks Family. I poured a glass and walked to the window, watching the rain wash the driveway clean. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the auctioneer would slam his gavel. Tomorrow morning, the bank's custom metalwork sign would come down. And tomorrow morning, Zora Banks would go shopping. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like rain. It tasted like iron. It tasted like victory. The morning of November 15th dawned with a sky the color of a bruised plum. It was a Tuesday, usually a day for production meetings and shipping schedules. But today, it was the day the history of the Banks family was put on the chopping block. The auction was not held at the shop itself, but in the sterile, echoing atrium of the county courthouse downtown. It was a public foreclosure auction, a spectator sport for vulture capitalists, scrap metal dealers, and real estate sharks looking to turn industrial dreams into condos. I was not there in person. I knew that if I walked into that room, the emotional volatility of my parents would cause a scene that might derail the proceedings. Instead, I sat in my new office at ZB Steel Solutions, the lights off, watching a private live stream provided by my legal counsel. On the screen, the camera angle was high and wide, capturing the rows of folding chairs and the raised podium of the auctioneer. I saw them arrive at 8:45. My father Otis walked with a cane he had never used before. His posture collapsed inward, as if his spine could no longer support the weight of his failure. My mother Viola clung to his elbow, her eyes darting around the room with the terrified look of an animal trapped in a burning barn. And then there was Andre. Even in the face of total ruin, my brother could not shed his delusions of grandeur. He was wearing a suit, though it was rumpled, and looked like he had slept in it. He didn't walk with the shame of a man who had squandered a fortune. He walked with a frantic, nervous energy, his head swiveling to assess the crowd. I could see him whispering to my father, gesturing with his hands, likely spinning some new fantasy about how this was all a strategic pivot. The room filled up quickly. I recognized many of the faces. There was Old Man Miller from the scrapyard down the river, a man who would melt down the Statue of Liberty if he could get a good price on the copper. There was a representative from a national logistics company that had been eyeing our warehouse location for years. And there were the flippers men in expensive casual wear, who looked at the spec sheets of my family's legacy and saw only square footage and tax write-offs. But there was one man in the room they didn't know. He sat in the front row, impeccable, in a charcoal gray bespoke suit, holding a leather folio. He didn't look at his phone. He didn't talk to the other bidders. He sat with the stillness of a predator, waiting for the herd to weaken. This was Mr. Silas, my attorney, the proxy I had hired to execute the kill. The auctioneer, a man with a voice like a gravel crusher, banged his gavel at 9 o'clock sharp. The sound echoed through my laptop speakers, and I saw my mother flinch on the screen. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer boomed, "we are here today for the judicial sale of assets belonging to Banks Custom Metalworks Incorporated, pursuant to the writ of execution from the First National Bank of Chicago. The bank has elected to offer the assets in two formats. First, we will bid on individual lots of machinery. Then we will bid on the real estate. Finally, we will entertain a bulk bid for the entire global package. The highest total value wins." This was the strategy I had engineered with Mr. Silas. We wanted the global package. I didn't just want the building, I wanted the machines. I wanted the name. I wanted the ghost of every mistake they had made so I could exorcise it. The bidding began with the machinery. Lot number 1, the auctioneer called out. A 2018 Amada hydraulic press brake. 200-ton capacity. Fully operational. Opening bid $5,000. $5,000. My stomach twisted. That machine cost $150,000 new. I had negotiated the financing for it myself 3 years ago. Old Man Miller raised his paddle. 5,000. 6,000, a man in the back called out. The bidding was sluggish. These men knew the machine was heavy. Moving it would cost 10 grand alone. They were bidding on it like it was a used lawnmower. Andre was gripping the back of the chair in front of him. I could imagine what he was thinking. He was probably doing the mental math, realizing that the proceeds wouldn't even cover the interest on the debt, let alone leave him with a golden parachute. The press brake sold for $22,000. A steal. A tragedy. Next came the CNC plasma table. Then the overhead crane system. Then the forklifts. One by one, the tools of my trade were sold off to strangers. My father had his head in his hands. He couldn't watch. He had bought that crane in 1995. He had named it Big Bertha. Now it was just lot number 4. Mr. Silas did not bid. He sat perfectly still, marking numbers on his notepad. He was waiting for the grand finale. Finally, the auctioneer cleared his throat. "Now we move to the real property located at 1500 Industrial Way. Includes 20,000 square feet of industrial warehouse office space and fenced yard. Opening bid $300,000. This was it. The land. The soil where I had scraped my knees and burned my hands. 300, the logistics guy called out immediately. 350, a developer shouted. 400, the logistics guy countered. The price climbed steadily. 450, 500, 525. At $600,000, the room went quiet. The logistics guy looked smug. He was getting a prime location for the price of a suburban house. Going once, the auctioneer chanted. Going twice. Mr. Silas raised his hand for the first time. 700,000, he said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a laser. Heads turned. The logistics guy frowned and leaned over to whisper to his associate. Who was this guy? He didn't look like a scrapper. He didn't look like a trucker. 725, the logistics guy tried. 800,000, Mr. Silas countered instantly. No hesitation, no consulting a calculator, just brute financial force. The room buzzed. 800,000 was a serious number. It was approaching the actual market value of the distressed property. The logistics guy shook his head. He folded his arms. He was out. Going once, going twice. Sold to the gentleman in the front row for $800,000. But it wasn't over. Now the auctioneer said, wiping his brow. We will calculate the total of the individual lots versus a global bid for everything. Real estate plus machinery. The bank prefers a clean exit. Does anyone wish to place a global bid for the entire estate of Bank's Custom Metalworks? The room fell silent. To buy everything meant you had to run a metal shop. You couldn't just strip it. You needed to know the business. Mr. Silas stood up. He buttoned his jacket. $1.2 million, he stated. For the land, the building, the machinery, the inventory, and the intellectual property rights to the name. A collective gasp went through the room. 1.2 million. It was enough to pay off the bank's primary lien. It was a number that commanded respect. Andre's head snapped up. I saw him grab my father's arm. He was excited. I could practically hear his thoughts through the screen. 1.2 million. That means the new owner has deep pockets. That means the new owner is a serious player. Andre was smiling. He was actually smiling. The fool thought he had found a savior. Any other bids, the auctioneer asked. Silence. The scrap dealers couldn't touch that number. The developers didn't want the old machines. Going once. Going twice. Sold. To bidder number 104 for $1,200,000. The gavel slammed down. The sound was final. Bank's Custom Metalworks was gone. It was dead. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 months. I owned it. I owned the walls that had confined me. I owned the roof that had sheltered my abusers. I owned the very ground they stood on. On the screen, the room broke up into chaos. People were standing gathering their coats. But Andre didn't leave. He smoothed his rumpled suit jacket. He ran a hand through his hair. He said something to my parents, gesturing for them to wait, and then he began to make his way toward the front of the room. He was heading straight for Mr. Silas. I turned up the volume on my laptop, praying the microphone on the auctioneer's podium would pick up the conversation. Mr. Silas was packing his folio, his expression unreadable. Andre approached him with his hand extended, putting on his best CEO face. "Excuse me, sir," Andre said. His voice was faint but audible. "I just wanted to congratulate you on a magnificent purchase. Truly, you got a diamond in the rough." Mr. Silas looked up. He didn't shake Andre's hand. He just stared at him with cool detachment. "Thank you," Mr. Silas said. "I am Andre Banks." Andre continued, undeterred by the snub. "I am the former CEO and, well, the vision behind the modernization of the facility. I assume you represent an investment group." "I represent a private holding company," Mr. Silas said cryptically. "Excellent, excellent." Andre nodded vigorously. "Well, look, I know the transition can be tricky. You have the machines, but you don't have the know-how. The intellectual capital is all in here." He tapped his temple. "I just wanted to offer my services. If your client needs a director of operations or a consultant to help bring the facility back online, I would be willing to stay on. For a fee, of course. But I know where the bodies are buried, so to speak. I laughed out loud in my empty office. The audacity was breathtaking. He had driven the car off a cliff and was now asking the tow truck driver if he could drive the wreck to the junkyard. Mr. Silas paused. He looked Andre up and down, taking in the cheap suit, the desperate eyes, the sweat on his forehead. My client is aware of your previous management tenure, Mr. Banks, Silas said. Then they know I have potential. Andre beamed. I have an MBA. I have experience. Mr. Silas snapped his folio shut. My client has given me strict instructions regarding personnel, he said. The new ownership has a very specific team in mind. However, the owner will be on site tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to take possession of the keys. If you wish to discuss employment, you are welcome to present your case to the owner directly. Andre's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Tomorrow at 9. Perfect. I will be there. I will have my resume ready. Please tell the owner that Andre Banks is ready to work. I will convey the message, Silas said. He turned and walked away, leaving Andre standing there with a grin plastered on his face. Andre rushed back to my parents. I saw him hugging my mother. I saw him shaking my father's hand. It is okay, I saw him mouth the words. I fixed it. I got a meeting. The new owner wants to meet me. We are going to be okay. My father looked skeptical, but desperate men will drink sand if you tell them it is water. He nodded slowly, allowing himself to believe the lie one last time. I closed the laptop. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., I picked up my phone and called Mike. Mike, I said, load up the truck, bring the welding gear, and bring a crowbar. What for, boss? Mike asked. We are moving into the new headquarters tomorrow, I said, and I have a feeling the old tenants are going to need some help carrying their boxes to the curb. I hung up. Andre thought he had a job interview. He thought he was going to charm a stranger into giving him his life back. He didn't know that the stranger was the sister he had betrayed. He didn't know that the only position I had available for him was a cautionary tale. I walked to the closet and pulled out my outfit for tomorrow. I wasn't going to wear a suit. I wasn't going to wear a dress. I pulled out my flame-resistant welding jacket. I pulled out my steel-toed boots. I pulled out my helmet with the custom paint job. Tomorrow I wasn't going as an investor. I was going as the master welder. I was going as the boss. And I couldn't wait to see the look on his face. The following morning the sky was a brilliant piercing blue, the kind of clear cold day that often follows a violent storm. I drank my coffee, standing up in my kitchen, watching the steam rise from the mug. I did not put on a power suit. I did not put on heels. I put on my favorite pair of steel-toed boots, the ones with the leather worn soft at the ankles. I put on my flame-resistant welding jacket, the one with the custom embroidery on the back. I grabbed my helmet. Today was not a day for boardrooms. It was a day for the shop floor. I drove to the old facility in my new truck. It was a heavy-duty pickup, black on black, lifted slightly to handle job site terrain. It looked like a tank. As I turned onto Industrial Way, my heart rate remained steady. I expected to feel nervous or sad, but all I felt was the calm precision of a welder about to strike an arc. I pulled up to the main gate at exactly 8:55. The chain-link fence was still there, but the padlock had been cut by the bank's agents. I drove through. There in the parking lot stood the remnants of the bank's dynasty. My father's old sedan was parked haphazardly near the entrance, its trunk open and filled with cardboard boxes. My mother was sitting in the passenger seat staring blankly at the dashboard. Brittany was leaning against her own car, which I noticed had a boot on the rear tire, presumably from a missed payment. She looked tired and angry, checking her phone incessantly. And then there was Andre. He was pacing back and forth in front of the main office door. He had tried to freshen up his suit, but in the harsh morning light he looked frayed. He was rehearsing his lines, mouthing words to the empty air, checking his watch every 30 seconds. He was waiting for the mysterious investor. He was waiting for his savior. I didn't park in the visitor lot. I drove my truck right up to the front entrance, pulling into the spot painted with the words CEO only. The tires crunched loudly on the gravel. Andre stopped pacing. He squinted at the truck, shielding his eyes from the sun. He didn't recognize the vehicle. He took a step forward, straightening his tie, a hopeful smile beginning to form on his lips. He thought this was it. The investor had arrived. I turned off the engine. The silence was sudden and absolute. I opened the door and stepped out. My boots hit the pavement with a heavy thud. The smile dropped from Andre's face so fast it was almost comical. It was replaced instantly by a look of confusion and then a flash of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Zora," he barked, walking toward me aggressively. "What are you doing here?" I slammed the truck door shut and leaned against it, crossing my arms over my chest. "Hello, Andre," I said. "Nice morning for a move." He stopped 3 feet away from me, his hands balled into fists at his sides. "Are you serious? You came all the way down here just to gloat. You saw the auction results and you came to watch us pack. That is sick, Zora. Even for you." My father climbed out of the sedan, moving slowly. He looked at me with dull, lifeless eyes. "Go home, Zora. We don't have anything left for you to take. The bank took it all. Leave us alone." Brittany looked up from her phone. She didn't say anything, but her eyes narrowed. She was looking at my truck. She was looking at my clothes. She was assessing the value of what she saw. "I am not here to gloat, Andre," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am here for a meeting." "A meeting?" Andre scoffed, laughing bitterly. "With who?" "The ghosts of the employees I fired." "There is nobody here, Zora. The new owner is coming at 9 o'clock. Mr. Silas said the new owner is very particular. If he sees you loitering here, he is going to have you removed. You are trespassing." I checked my watch. It was 8:59. "Mr. Silas is a very punctual man," I said. As if on cue, a black sedan pulled into the lot. Mr. Silas stepped out carrying his leather folio. He walked toward us, his face impassive. Andre straightened up immediately, turning his back on me to face the lawyer. He put on his best smile, the one he used to charm my parents out of money. "Mr. Silas," Andre said, extending a hand. "Good morning." "Perfect timing. My family and I are just finishing clearing out the personal effects, but I am ready to meet your client. I have prepared a brief presentation on the operational efficiencies I can bring to the table during this transition." Mr. Silas did not shake his hand. He walked past Andre as if he were a ghost. He walked straight up to me. "Good morning, Ms. Banks," Silas said. "Good morning, Mr. Silas," I replied. "Do you have the package?" He opened his folio and pulled out a heavy ring of keys. The keys to the front door, the keys to the gate, the keys to the safe. "Here is the transfer of possession," Silas said, handing them to me. "The deed has been recorded. The funds have been cleared. The property is legally yours." I took the keys. The metal felt cold and heavy in my hand. It was the weight of 40 years of history. Andre made a noise that sounded like a strangled cat. He looked from Silas to me and back again, his brain struggling to process the visual data. "Wait," Andre stammered. "Wait a minute. What are you doing? Why are you giving her the keys? She is just the sister. She is nobody." Mr. Silas turned to face him slowly. "Mr. Banks, allow me to introduce you to the principal of the holding company that purchased this asset. This is Zora Banks, owner of ZB Steel Solutions, and as of this morning, the sole owner of Banks Custom Metalworks." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a tank. My father grabbed the hood of his car to steady himself. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. Brittany dropped her phone. It hit the pavement with a crack, but she didn't even look down. Andre took a step back, his face draining of color until he looked like a wax figure. "You," he whispered. "You bought it." I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. "Yes, Andre. I bought it. But," how he sputtered. "Where did you get the money?" $1.2 million. "You are a welder. You make wages." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I make profits, Andre. Huge difference." You see, while you were busy redecorating the office and buying handbags, I was busy fulfilling the Sterling Hotel contract. The one you lost. Mr. Sterling paid me very well, and because my overhead is low and my skills are high, the bank was very happy to lend me the rest. I pointed to the building behind him. I bought this place for pennies on the dollar, Andre. Do you know why it was so cheap? Because you destroyed its value. You ran it into the ground so hard that nobody else wanted it. You basically handed it to me on a silver platter. No. Andre shook his head, backing away. No, this isn't right. Dad, tell her. Tell her she can't do this. This is my heritage. My father looked at me. For a moment I saw a flash of the old anger, the patriarch who demanded obedience. But then he looked at the keys in my hand. He looked at the confident way I stood in my work boots. And he realized he had no power left. She won, Otis whispered. Let it go, son. She won. Brittany suddenly pushed herself off her car. She walked over to me, her eyes wide and wet with fake tears. Zora, she said, her voice trembling. Oh my God, I knew it. I told Andre you were the smart one. I told him we should have listened to you. She reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Save it, Brittany, I said, cold as ice. I heard what you said last night. You hate me. You think I am a bitter spinster. No, no, that was just the stress talking, she pleaded. Look, Zora, I am leaving him. I am filing for divorce. I need a job. I can help you run the office. I know the vendors. I know the accounts. I laughed. It was a harsh sound. You know how to embezzle, Brittany. That is the only skill you demonstrated. I have a new accountant. She uses a calculator, not Instagram. I turned my back on her and looked at Andre. He was staring at the building, tears streaming down his face. You are going to fire me, aren't you? He whispered. You are going to kick me out. I shook my head. I can't fire you, Andre. You don't work here. You haven't worked here since the bank seized the property. You are trespassing. I jangled the keys. However, I am hiring. Andre's head snapped up. Hope is a cruel thing. It flickered in his eyes, desperate and pathetic. You are? He asked. Zora. I will take anything. I will be the manager. I will be the assistant manager. Just give me a chance. I can learn. I looked him up and down. I looked at his soft hands. I looked at his expensive suit. I have an opening for a scrap sorter, I said. Minimum wage. No benefits. You report to Mike. Mike. Andre recoiled. The foreman? I have to report to the guy I used to boss around. If you want the job? Yes, I said. But be warned, Andre. Mike is very particular about safety. If you mess up, he will fire you. And I will let him. Andre looked at his parents. He looked at Brittany, who was now ignoring him completely. He looked at the shop that used to be his kingdom. I can't, he whispered. I can't sweep floors, Zora. I am a CEO. Then you are unemployed, I said simply. I turned to Mr. Silas. Thank you for your help. I will take it from here. Mr. Silas nodded, tipped his imaginary hat, and got back in his car. I walked past my family. I walked up the steps to the front door. I put the key in the lock. It turned smoothly. Zora, my mother called out. Her voice was weak, trembling. I paused, but I didn't turn around. Are we allowed to come visit? She asked. I thought about it. I thought about the holidays spent feeling like an outsider. I thought about the insults. I thought about the betrayal. Maybe someday, I said, but not today. Today is a work day. And unlike you, I have work to do. I opened the door and stepped inside. The smell hit me instantly. Dust, old grease, stale air. But underneath that was the smell of steel. I flipped the light switch. The rows of fluorescent lights flickered to life one by one, illuminating the silent machines. I saw the press brake where I had learned to bend metal. I saw the spot where I had welded my first bead. I walked to the center of the floor. My boots echoed in the emptiness. I wasn't Zora the daughter. I wasn't Zora the sister. I was Zora Banks, the owner, and I had a lot of cleaning up to do. Outside, I heard car doors closing. I heard an engine start. I heard tires rolling away on the gravel. They were gone. I took a deep breath. "Okay, Big Bertha," I said, patting the rusted steel column of the overhead crane. "Let's get you back to work." The payoff was sweet, but the work was everything. The first hour of my ownership was not spent popping champagne or sitting in the big leather chair. It was spent establishing boundaries. While I was inside inspecting the machinery, Mike alerted me over the radio that the gate situation was escalating. It seemed that Andre and Brittany had not driven away into the sunset as I had hoped. Instead, they were parked just outside the property line, harassing the security guard I had hired to manage the transition. They were demanding to be let back in, claiming they had forgotten personal items, claiming they had rights, claiming that this was all a misunderstanding that could be cleared up if I just stopped being so emotional. I walked out to the gate. The wind was picking up whipping dust across the asphalt. I saw Andre standing by the guard booth, his face red with exertion, his hands waving wildly. Brittany was sitting in her car, honking the horn in a rhythmic, annoying pattern that grated on the nerves. I signaled to the guard to open the pedestrian gate. I stepped out, but I did not cross the line. I stood firmly on the property that was now legally mine. Andre saw me and rushed forward. "Zora, thank God. Tell this gorilla to let us in." I left my laptop. I left my contact list. And Mom left her photo albums in the break room. "You can't keep our property. That is theft." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had been handed a kingdom and sold it for magic beans. Anything left inside that building as of 9 a.m. is considered asset of the acquisition, Andre. That is what the contract says. The laptop belongs to the company. The contact list belongs to the company. Even the stapler on your desk belongs to the company. Andre looked like he was going to choke. "But my contacts, my network." "Your network consists of people you owe money to," I said. "I am doing you a favor by keeping them away from you." Brittany rolled down her window. "Just give us the photos, you monster. Do you really want to hold old pictures hostage?" I looked at the guard. His name was Sam, a retired linebacker with a face like granite. "Sam," I said clearly, "these individuals are trespassing. If they are not gone in 2 minutes, call the police. And if they return, file a restraining order." "You wouldn't dare," Andre whispered. "Watch me," I said. I turned around and walked back toward the shop. I heard Andre shouting. I heard Brittany screaming profanities. But then I heard Sam's deep voice giving them a countdown. 10 seconds later, I heard tires screeching on the pavement. They were gone. And this time, they were not coming back. In the months that followed, the fate of the Banks family played out with the brutal predictability of a Greek tragedy. Without the company to siphon funds from and without the house to leverage against loans, the reality of their financial ruin hit them like a tidal wave. My parents lost everything. The bank foreclosure on their home was swift and merciless. They were given 30 days to vacate the house they had lived in for 40 years. I heard through the grapevine that the day the sheriff came to evict them, my father refused to leave the porch until they threatened him with handcuffs. They had no savings. Their retirement fund had been quietly liquidated years ago to pay for Andre's tuition and lifestyle. They had to leave Chicago. The city was too expensive and their shame was too public. They moved back to Alabama to the small rural town where my father was born. They moved into a small rental property, a 2-room wooden house that had seen better days. It had a leaking roof and a gravel driveway. It was a far cry from the heated floors and granite countertops they were used to. My cousin told me that my father spends his days sitting on the porch, staring at the dirt road, muttering about how the system is rigged. He tells anyone who will listen that his daughter swindled him, that I stole his legacy. But nobody listens. In a small town, people know the difference between a worker and a leech. My mother has taken to calling distant relatives asking for money, but the checks never come. She is trapped in a prison of her own making, living with a husband who is bitter and a son who never visits. And Andre, the golden child, the CEO. Reality hit him the hardest. With a bankruptcy on his record and a reputation for gross negligence in the industry, no reputable firm would hire him. The MBA he was so proud of turned out to be useless, without the experience to back it up. He applied for management jobs. He applied for sales jobs. He was rejected by everyone. Eventually, he had to eat. He had to pay rent on the studio apartment he moved into after Brittany kicked him out. The last I heard, he was working for a logistics company near O'Hare Airport. He is not a manager. He is not a supervisor. He is a loader. He spends 10 hours a day lifting heavy boxes onto conveyor belts. His back aches. His hands are calloused. He wears a neon vest and answers to a 22-year-old shift supervisor who yells at him if he is slow. The irony is not lost on me. He spent his life looking down on manual labor, believing he was too good to get his hands dirty. Now his hands are the only thing keeping him fed. I wonder if he thinks about the welders he fired every time he lifts a box. I wonder if he remembers telling me that I had a laborer's mindset. Now he has a laborer's life without the dignity of the skill. Brittany did not stick around to see his downfall. As soon as she realized the money was truly gone, she filed for divorce. She tried to sue for alimony. She tried to sue for a share of his future earnings, but the judge laughed her out of court. You cannot get half of zero. She had to move back in with her mother, a woman who makes Brittany look like a saint. She is raising the baby alone, working as a receptionist at a car dealership. She spends her breaks scrolling through Instagram, posting inspirational quotes about rising above toxic people. She blocked me. I blocked her. We exist in different universes now, but I did not spend my time dwelling on their misery. I had a business to build. The renovation of the shop took 2 months. We stripped the walls. We repainted the floors. We brought in new lighting that banished the shadows of the past. I sold the old, outdated machines that Andre had neglected and installed the new high-tech equipment I had purchased with the sterling profits. The day we were ready to reopen was a crisp morning in early spring. The air smelled of rain and possibilities. I stood in the center of the executive office. It didn't look like a country club anymore. It looked like a command center. The beige love seat was gone. The lavender diffusers were gone. In their place were drafting tables, schematic drawings, and whiteboards covered in production schedules. I had one final task to perform. I opened the box I had carried out of this building 3 months ago. The cardboard was soft at the corners. I pulled out the frames. First, the OSHA safety certification. I hung it by the door where everyone could see it. It was a promise to my crew that they would go home safe every night. Next, the ISO quality certificate. I hung it behind my desk. It was a promise to my clients that we delivered perfection. And finally, my certified welding inspector license. The piece of paper that proved I earned my place. I found a stud in the wall right in the center. I hammered the nail in. One strong, sure strike. I hung the frame. I used a level to make sure it was perfect. Zora Banks, CWI. It looked good. It looked right. Hey boss, are you ready? I turned around. Mike was standing in the doorway holding a bottle of sparkling cider and 4 plastic cups. Behind him were the other guys, the crew that had stuck by me. I smiled. I am ready, Mike. We walked out onto the mezzanine. Below us, the shop floor was humming. The new CNC plasma cutter was singing its electric song. The sparks from the welding bays were flying like fireflies. It was a symphony of industry. But there was one thing missing. I walked down the stairs and out the front door. A truck was parked there with a lift. 2 men were finishing the installation of the new sign above the entrance. They pulled away the protective plastic sheet. The sun hit the brushed steel letters. Zora Banks Steel. It wasn't Banks Custom Metalworks. That name was buried. This was my name. This was my steel. I felt a lump in my throat. I thought about the little girl who used to follow her father around this yard begging to hold the flashlight. I thought about the woman who sat in the corner during meetings, ignored and silenced. I thought about the sister who was told she wasn't enough. They were all gone now. I looked at the sign. I looked at the future. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the bank. A deposit from the naval contract had just cleared. It was a number with 6 zeros. I didn't call my parents to brag. I didn't text Andre to rub it in. I didn't need to. Their absence was the only validation I needed. I turned back to the shop. Mike was waiting for me holding a fresh set of blueprints. "We got a rush order, Zora," he said. "Structural beams for the new hospital wing. They need them in 3 weeks. Can we do it?" I took the blueprints. I scanned the numbers, the load calculations, the steel grades. It was complex. It was difficult. It was exactly the kind of work I loved. I looked at Mike. I looked at my crew. "Can we do it?" I asked. "Mike, we are Zora Bank Steel. We don't just do it. We do it right." I put on my helmet. I flipped the visor down. The world turned a shade of green through the protective lens. "Fire up the torches, boys," I said. "We have metal to burn." They told me I was a woman. They told me I couldn't carry the weight of a family business. They were right. I couldn't carry their dead weight. I couldn't carry their ego, their greed, and their incompetence. So I dropped them. And once I dropped the burden, I found that I could fly. I didn't inherit an empire. I built one. And this time it was built on a foundation of steel, not lies. And that is the sweetest revenge of all. This story reminds us that your value is never defined by those who refuse to see it, even if they share your blood. Zora proved that walking away from a toxic environment isn't an act of weakness. It is a strategic declaration of self-worth. When you finally stop carrying the dead weight of other people's incompetence, you gain the freedom to build your own empire. True power comes from skill, integrity, and the courage to bet on yourself against all odds. Have you ever had to cut ties to save your future? Share your story in the comments below, and please like and subscribe for more tales of resilience and justice.